Coming up on Esoteric Atlanta.
Wheaties was never a nickname used by John Carr, and specifically that quote-unquote Maury lied. That Maury Terry made up the story that Wheaties was a nickname of John Carr. Well, the police concluded in their own investigation that had been a nickname used by John Carr and that it was known by a few of his friends and associates.
In early 1978, just months after the arrest of David Berkowitz, another name quietly entered the margins of the Son of Sam story: John Carr. Carr, a New York native, had relocated to Minot, North Dakota, a small and isolated city known primarily for Minot Air Force Base. It was a dramatic change from Yonkers, geographically, socially, and emotionally, and one that placed Carr far from the public attention surrounding the Son of Sam case. At the time of his unaliving, Carr was involved in a relationship with a woman named Linda. According to accounts later referenced by journalist Maury Terry, Linda had access to housing connected to Minot Air Force Base because she was still legally married to a serviceman, though the two had recently separated. Her husband was active military, and her connection to the base helped explain how Carr became rooted in Minot despite having no long-standing ties to North Dakota. Not long after Berkowitz's arrest, John Carr was found unalived in his apartment in Minot. Authorities ruled his death self-unaliving, and the case was closed without fanfare or national attention. Officially, that should have been the end of the story. But to Maury Terry, the circumstances surrounding Carr's life in Minot, including his relationship with Linda, his proximity to a military base, and the timing of his death, raised lingering questions. Terry believed Carr's move, his associations, and the sudden unaliving fit into a larger pattern he was investigating, one that suggested Berkowitz may not have acted entirely alone. Minot itself plays a quiet but important role in this narrative. With its transient population tied to the Air Force Base, Minot was a place where people could arrive temporarily, blend in, and leave a few lasting records. Carr's presence there, through Linda's housing connections and her recent separation, placed him in a setting that was both isolated and perhaps easy to overlook. To be clear, none of these circumstances prove wrongdoing. Law enforcement has consistently maintained that Berkowitz acted alone, and John's Carr death remains officially classified as a self-unaliving. No charges were ever filed linking Carr, Linda, or anyone connected to Minot Air Force Base to the Son of Sam case. Still, Carr's name continues to resurface, and for good reason. It's not because of what was established in court, but because of the unanswered questions that still surround his final months. His relationship with Linda, his relocation to Minot, and the timing of his unaliving remain part of the story that refuses to fully fade. Sometimes the most unsettling chapters in true crime aren't written in headlines. They're found in a quiet town, distant locations, and relationships that history only partly remembers. Against this backdrop, rumors and allegations of occult or satanic activity began to circulate, not just in Minot but across the United States. This period would later become known as part of the broader satanic panic era, when fears about secret cults, ritual abuse, and underground networks spread through media, churches, and law enforcement circles. In Minot, those concerns never resulted in large prosecution, but stories persisted. Whispers about unusual gatherings, symbolic graffiti, occult interest, and individuals who appear drawn to a darker belief system. In a town as isolated and tightly knit as Minot, even small rumors could grow very quickly. Some investigators and journalists later suggested that military towns were especially vulnerable to this kind of speculation. The combination of stress, isolation, and frequent relocation made it easy for people to misinterpret behavior or to believe that something hidden was operating just out of sight. Still, Monat's name occasionally resurfaces in true crimes discussions because of its timing, its military presence, and its appearance in broader investigative theories, particularly those advanced by journalists who believe violent crime in other parts of the country were connected to occult-inspired networks. This is important because for most people, the Son of Sam case has a simple ending. David Berkowitz was arrested in 1977 and confessed to a series of unalivings and was sentenced to prison. Case closed. But for journalist Maury Terry and some of the surviving victims, that explanation never felt complete. Terry spent decades investigating the Son of Sam case, and he came to a very different conclusion, one that challenged the official narrative entirely. He believed that Berkowitz did not act alone, and that the crimes were connected to a satanic cult operating across multiple states. According to Terry, Berkowitz was part of a loose network of individuals influenced by occult ideology, ritual symbolism, and extremist belief systems. Terry argued that this group wasn't a single organized cult in the traditional sense, but rather a fragmented underground movement, one that shared beliefs, rituals, and a willingness to commit violence. One of the reasons Terry focused on cult involvement was the language used in the Son of Sam letters. The notes sent to police and the media referenced demons, possessions, and commands from unseen forces. Terry believed these weren't just metaphors or the ravings of a lone madman, but reflections of a belief system shared by others. John Carr's name was also allegedly used in the letters. John Carr, whose father's name was Sam. Terry also pointed to Berkowitz's later statements, in which Berkowitz claimed that other individuals were involved and that he acted as part of a group. While Berkowitz's credibility has always been questioned, Terry believed these claims aligned with witness statements, timelines, and associations that didn't fit the official narrative. In his book, The Ultimate Evil, Terry connected these ideas to what he saw as a broader pattern of occult-inspired violence in the 1970s, a time when fringe belief systems, counterculture movements, and extremist groups overlapped in unsettling ways. To be clear, the official narrative has rejected Terry's conclusions. Nobody was ever charged with occultic ties, and Berkowitz remains the sole person legally responsible for the crimes. Still, Terry's work refuses to disappear. His theories continue to surface in documentaries, books, and debates, not because it was proven in court, but because it raises uncomfortable questions about whether the full story was ever explored. Maury Terry didn't claim to have all the answers. What he believed was that the Son of Sam case represented something darker than a single man, a glimpse into how ideology, belief, and violence can interact in ways that are easy to dismiss, but hard to fully explain. And decades later, that belief remains one of the most controversial and enduring interpretations of one of America's most infamous cases. And as we speak about in the episode today with Criminal Justice Chris and Jonathan Mitchell, we go over the unaliving of John Carr and the mysteries surrounding his alleged involvement in this cult, and the mysteries, frankly, surrounding his own passing. We're really focusing on this because there is a bigger picture here. And for the past 6 years on my channel, Esoteric Atlanta, we have been studying this religion, this group. Historically, presently, we've been watching the way they move in our world. Maybe when Maury Terry first released his information, the idea of an elite group of people running our world with ties to a unsavory religion, that might have been crazy, wild, conspiracy. But in this new century, the 21st century, we are fully aware that this is not conspiracy. This is literally happening. And the Son of Sam case in that regard represents something much bigger, a bigger picture where the truth is coming to light, where darkness is being exposed. And as it says in the Bible, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and I will repayeth." Right now, I know this opening is pretty long, longer than my normal openings, and you are welcome to go ahead and skip over. I'll place the timestamp on the screen to the interview with Criminal Justice Chris and Jonathan. But I want to take a moment for those who are unfamiliar with the case, or for those who want to hear a little bit more about this Minot situation with John Carr. I'm going to read a little bit from Maury Terry's book, The Ultimate Evil. I'm going to be starting from page 258. Web of Conspiracies, The Dominoes Fall. Minot, why not? Now, as we say in this episode, this case is full of rabbit holes. The journey never ends in the Son of Sam case. Literally every corner of this case has a whole universe of its own. And as I said off camera, I believe, perhaps on camera, maybe I said it off camera when we were done, the thing about this case is Berkowitz is actually the least interesting part of this whole story. He's the least interesting. He's not the main character in this. The main characters in this story, in this plot, in my opinion, are those who remain in the shadows. So if you want to go ahead and skip ahead to the interview, go right ahead. But if you want to hear a little bit more of a backstory from Maury Terry's own book, The Ultimate Evil, then please stick around for a few more minutes as I go through it and then enter into the interview. Now, for those watching, I am using fair use. Under the United States Constitution, we are able to take parts of copywritten material and openly read them or discuss them if it's leading towards a deeper, broader conversation. And that is what I am doing, reading a section of Maury Terry's work. So again, on page 258, we're going to be starting where Maury Terry makes contact with another journalist from New Jersey who had been looking through the Minot Daily News, and they're going to start a conversation about what he discovered about John Carr as a reporter. That's where we're going to start, then we're going to skip ahead to some other information as well. So here we go. In Minot, North Dakota, far from the New York subterfuge, Jeff Nyes, 26, a reporter and native of Ridgewood, New Jersey, was scanning the overnight AP wire at the Minot Daily News when he saw the dispatch about Moskowitz's story and its conclusion that Berkowitz wasn't alone in this case. Now again, the Moskowitz, that was the last, technically, I don't think it was the last one, but technically on paper, Stacy Moskowitz was the last victim. Nyes' mind immediately clicked onto John Carr. Nyes wasn't working in North Dakota when Carr died 17 months earlier, but as his paper's current police reporter, he'd heard stories of Carr's links to Berkowitz from various Minot and Ward County police officers, connections that were unknown by us in New York. Twice in the month after Carr's death, I phoned Dakota authorities only to be turned away. And New York officials had slammed the lid on us in the East. But Nyes, who dealt with the Dakota officers daily, knew explosive facts which had been kept from us. He phoned Gannett's office in the White Plains and reached Tom Bartley, who told him I was en route to Fire Island, but would be checking back with him. 4 days later, Nyes and I established contact. So this is Jeff Nyes speaking to Maury Terry. There's a lot of information on John Carr out there. They know he was involved with Berkowitz and belonged to a satanic cult. They sent it all to New York before Berkowitz pleaded guilty, but it was squelched back there. What? I was incredulous. We were after him before his death and they closed us down. Now you're saying they knew he was tied to Berkowitz all along? Exactly, Jeff emphasized. And a cult too? Yeah, they got it all right after Carr died. Jeff, you'd have no way of knowing this, but we saw Berkowitz 9 months ago and he confirmed knowing Carr and said there was also a cult. Now I hear the cops out there uncovered the same thing long before we talked to Berkowitz. Damn it! Confirmations of everything existed all along. Berkowitz's statements were confirmed before we even met him. They didn't really cover it up out here, Jeff said. They sent it all to New York. Okay, but don't you see there's no debate on this anymore. Both Carr and Berkowitz admitted to knowing each other, and there's cult evidence on both ends. We've got it. Jeff Nyes then began filling in the blanks. Over the next 2 weeks, the scope of what had been hidden about John Carr was unveiled to me. The information was stunning. Finally, I told Jeff we need to talk with one of the officers involved in the Carr investigation. 2 more days elapsed before Nyes persuaded Lieutenant Terry Gardner of the Ward County Sheriff's Department to speak with me. It was Gardner who was quoted in the Post story about Carr's death and said the Dakota investigation was complete. Gardner was initially suspicious of me, and several conversations ensued before he began to open up at all. But when he did, he put Minot Police Officer Mike on the extension. Mike, who'd done undercover work in the Minot rug culture, had himself developed information on Carr. Hell yeah, Gardner said. We said the investigation was done. We didn't know those papers in New York a thing. Some of them thought they were God Almighty because they were from New York City, and we didn't take too well to that. In the second place, we were asked to keep it quiet by the Westchester Sheriff Department because they told us there was a confidential investigation going on. Who asked you to keep it quiet, and what did you do? I asked. The investigator's name was Ken, and he said they had a case going on with John Carr and Son of Sam. Yeah, thanks to us they did, I said. They didn't know shit until I told them. You told them? Gardner was surprised. Yeah, and before then we went to the Brooklyn DA's office. Well, we forwarded everything we found to Westchester, Gardner said. We couldn't believe we never heard from anyone in New York after that. It just faded away. It died. Someone there called our sheriff because we kept looking into it and told us to forget it. You're aware they then ignored what the people dug up and let Berkowitz plead guilty as a lone person 3 months later? Yeah, we were surprised there wasn't any follow-ups, but what could we do? New York had the Son of Sam case, not us. That's right, Gardner said. I'm certain they figured that Carr was Berkowitz's accomplishment and he was dead, so they couldn't prosecute him. And to let this out would have blown the whole case against Berkowitz out of the water. All of his confessions, everything would go up in smoke. Was Carr an occult? I asked. Yes, Gardner said. He was a cultie, and he was involved with Berkowitz. We interviewed a lot of his friends and looked into his life pretty good at the time. There was a lot of rug dealing out here too, Mike cut in, and old John Carr was up to his neck in it. Do either of you guys know Carr's nicknames? I asked. Sure, Gardner answered. JC was one, and Wheaties was another. Where'd you get that? His girlfriend, Linda O'Connor, and his rug counselor, Gardner said. That's a big piece of information, gentlemen. Berkowitz told us John Carr was John Wheaties. Sure, Mike agreed. They knew each other. We got that too. So basically, guys, in this, we're hearing from this book that the Minot, North Dakota Police Department was very certain that John Carr was absolutely involved in a satanic cult that was also dealing rugs, as we say here on YouTube. I have to obviously change some of these words, as you guys can probably hear me stumbling a little bit, changing words to meet YouTube's regulations. And they absolutely knew, because the Son of Sam case was a big case, and for those who are not from the United States, North Dakota and New York City are miles apart. You'd have to fly, really, to get to both locations from one another. So many, many miles apart, different states. And the Son of Sam case was so big that they obviously, North Dakota, knew that it was an ongoing investigation for this situation happening in New York City, in Yonkers. And when they found John Carr, especially after his untimely unaliving, they basically, in North Dakota, knew that he was part of this Son of Sam case. They knew it. From this book, it appears that the police department knew that he was very much involved. This was a cult. They sent all of their information to New York, thinking that it would aid New York in their investigation into the whole Son of Sam crime, and were surprised when Berkowitz was charged with everything, and all of their investigation they put into the case was dropped. And not only that, what I find interesting is that they got calls from New York basically telling them to stop investigating. I mean, basically the way it's written is they told us to forget it, but to me, when I'm reading that, that sounds like a threat. That sounds like the New York authorities called the North Dakota authorities, and in my opinion, from what I'm reading, speculating, threatened them to stop looking deeper into John Carr. So let's skip ahead to page 261. We're going to talk about John Carr when he was found, when his body was found. When Carr's body was found the night of February 16th, 1978, he was in fact termed a probable homicide victim, not the self-unaliver as later told to the Post. So you get that, guys? He was originally labeled as homicide. Immediately was labeled as a homicide. Gardner said, at the time, we didn't really know what happened. We eventually had to call it an apparent self-unaliver. But we never really closed the case. If information was later found to call it a homicide, we'd reopen it. What Gardner didn't mention is the tentative determination of an apparent self-unaliving eliminated the need for a long, complicated investigation, which could have failed. As Sheriff Investigator Glenn later told the Minot Daily News, New York told us Carr was wanted for questioning. I viewed him as a devil worshiper who blew himself away rather than get caught. Yes, a devil worshiper. Glenn said he found Carr's tarot cards and occult posters with X's and O's and inverted crosses and snakes on them. And there was more. On February 21, the day before our post story appeared, Westchester's sheriff investigator Kenneth connected North Dakota concerning Carr. He reported to his superior the day after I called his superior about Carr's death that he had, and this is in quotes, connected the Minot, North Dakota Police Department speaking to Lieutenant Hendrickson, who revealed to me that John Carr, date of birth 10/12/46, was in fact found dead in their jurisdiction and that it was being carried as a homicide, but was not to be classified as a self-unaliving as of this writing. He further stated that the Ward County Sheriff's Department was investigating the case. He informed me that a Detective Getson was working on the case. I then spoke to Deputy Lynn Howe, who related to me that John C. Carr was the victim of a homicide, as yet not classified as self-unaliving, and that their investigation into the case was continuing. He did, however, inform me that they were in possession of written statements from friends of John Carr in which John Carr allegedly told them he was friends of David Berkowitz and knew him personally for a long time. Also, at this time, the writer was informed that Detective Getson had interviewed a psychiatrist who was treating John Carr, who listed him as a paranoid schizophrenic and made statements to Detective Getson of Carr's problems. Detective Getson also asserted that John Carr made, during therapy, drawings of David Berkowitz, his home, apartment, etc. Detective Getson informed the investigator that he would be sending his writer via mail copies of reports and statements, etc. The undersigned asked Detective Getson at this point if any other law enforcement agencies had contacted him yet regarding this case, to which he stated that a Westchester station had called him. Other members of his department were contacted by the New York Post. After the first statement was made by them, Ward County Sheriff's Department, they were hanging up on these people and did not discuss the case further with anyone except the undersigned. As per our conversation on this date, may this serve to request all information regarding John Carr as a homicide of your jurisdiction. They request copies of investigation, any photos or photos found in residence revealing any connections or possible connections with New York or residents of New York. Also, copies of statements you have from friends, official letters of requested in mail to your jurisdiction to date. Later that same night, the Post press prepared to roll. Another telex was sent to North Dakota from Westchester authorities. This one impounded all of John Carr's effects. This department believes the family of John C. Carr, homicide, your jurisdiction, en route to your jurisdiction, an attempt to regain or take possession of personal property of victim Carr. This property presently impounded by your department of this department. Do not release to family. Do not release to family. You hear that, guys? If any difficulty, please call attention to Chief Investigator. Investigator immediately. Repeat. Do not release property. Terry then writes, on February 22nd, with the Post article on the newsstands, it reported that that the investigators have done the initial check on Carr's brother Michael, as Maury Terry, recommended 2 days earlier. I advised them that North Dakota contacts told us Michael, 25, was a counselor in the Church of Scientology and was professionally involved in photographics and illustrations, a possible link to the Breslin letter printing style. Okay, you guys, so I think I'm going to leave it there for Maury Terry stuff. Again, you can find The Ultimate Evil anywhere where you can buy books online. when we talk about the Church of Scientology, that gets us into the process Church of Final Judgment, which allegedly is either this satanic cult that Berkowitz and the Carrs were allegedly involved with, or is part of the circle of these cults. So that's why the Church of Scientology mention with Michael Carr, John Carr's brother, was important. And so, yes, if you have any questions about them, please ask down in the comment section below. I hope this helps for those who are not familiar with this case. This case is very windy, but moving forward into the episode, we are going to be exclusively now talking about John Carr and the night of his unaliving. And of course, before we get into the episode today, just a great big thank you to all of our patrons and our producers and our Substack supporters over on Substack. Of course, you guys know that this channel is solely run by crowdfunding. We don't make any money doing this, and so I thank you so much for those who donate to us each month. We also have memberships now available if you care to join our memberships, but we appreciate you guys so much and how much you do to help us here on the channel. As soon as we figure out how to get your names up with our new filming software, we will have your names back up on the screen. Thank you so much, guys, and now let's get on with the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Esoteric Atlanta. It does say live in the corner, John and Criminal Justice Chris, but we are not live. We are pre-recording this, so I don't want you guys to panic. We're on new software, as my channel knows. We're on StreamYard now, and there's a lot of benefits to pre-recording on StreamYard because it does give us the option to cut clips, which is great. That helps us get these videos out. But this is going to be a super fascinating conversation today. We're going to be talking a lot about John Carr. Welcome, Jonathan. Welcome, Criminal Justice Chris. First of all, how are you two doing today? How are you guys today? Before we even get into it, how are you?
You go first, John.
I'm doing good. I'm just hoping the weather doesn't get bad, but yeah, otherwise doing fine.
Yeah, I'm doing fine too. We're supposed to get a storm around here, and the grocery stores are selling out of food because apparently everybody's overreacting, like we have another influx of breakouts coming in.
I'm the same, you guys. We're going to be airing this video on Monday, but we're filming it on Friday. So for you guys watching from the future, you'll know whether or not we got hit with what they're calling the storm of the century. I feel like it's a little early in the century to already be labeling it that. But Jonathan and I are both in the South, and we don't do well with this kind of stuff. All the church ladies think Jesus is coming back. The Piggly Wiggly is selling out of bread and water and milk. Don't know why milk sells out, but there you have it. And so we are just praying that we don't lose power, because that would get for our northern friends. We don't have the equipment that you guys have. We don't have the salt trucks. We don't have, so it can get dangerous down here when inclement weather happens. And so for everybody in it's like 35 states or something that are kind of targeted. I know our governor here in Georgia, Governor Kemp, did call for a 7-day emergency. So I hope everybody is safe and it's all okay. I hope that the media made a big deal out of this and it's not that big of a deal. And I hope everybody just has some nice little snow days and they don't lose power and you get to have fun. So, but with that being said, y'all, where do we want to start? First of all, who is John Carr to my audience?
Okay, John Carr, just as a brief overview, he was allegedly associated with David Berkowitz and others who were allegedly involved with the Son of Sam group in New York during from 76 to 77. He grew up in Yonkers. He was a military person, and unfortunately, he died an untimely death on February 17th of 1978, and there are still questions lingering about the true cause of his death.
Yes. And his father, what's interesting, we were talking about this backstage, what makes it even more interesting is his father was a man named Sam Carr. And of course, this was called Son of Sam. Sam can mean multiple different things, though. And of course, references and the letters left at some of the crime scenes, which we might get into. But there was allegations that allegedly the Carr family could have allegedly been involved in maybe some occultic practices. And so this John Carr and Michael Carr, I feel like, in my opinion, and you guys are way deeper into these studies than I am, but they're kind of these enigmas. And because they're both gone, there's still a lot of questions around their involvement or lack of, or their relationship to David Berkowitz. Now, in the book Dead Names by Simon, about the Necronomicon, the first half of the book, it does talk about the Carrs and their involvement with the occult and allegedly with Satanism. And so it's not just in the Son of Sam case that we see this connection, but there are also other references to maybe their prominence in this world, allegedly. Yes. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say, and I think that the person or individual who wrote the Necronomicon is pretty reliable.
Yeah, I do too. I agree. Is there anything you want to add to that, Jonathan, about John Carr that you feel like our audience should know before we get into this?
Yeah, no, I think that covers it. The family, I mean, the entire family is key to the whole story. But yeah, there's been a lot of contention around the whole issue of the family's involvement, and that's to be expected. But yeah, I think Chris has covered it accurately.
And I'll further say, I think that the district attorney tapes that were released years ago through a Freedom of Information Act have raised more questions than answers. Yes. And it's mostly because of the way they were formatted, and a lot of the district attorney's tapes, you don't hear the person's voice. You don't hear the interview questions. You don't know if there were follow-up questions given. They just essentially read the person's answers back, and not everything's covered. If you compare DA tape to DA tape, it'll say one thing in one tape and another thing in another, and you know that they didn't include everything in the DA tape or the DA interview in another tape. So that's problematic.
Yeah, that's right. I would say some of the investigators maybe that were sent, especially the people that had to go across the country and interview various people of interest in North Dakota, those investigators that were sent west, maybe all of them did not have their full attention or interest on the case as they were conducting those interviews.
And I will say, in this whole saga, this whole cast of characters in the Son of Sam circle, the NYPD and the court systems also play a character in this, because it's not shocking. I personally, I'm of the opinion that not every NYPD, I want to make that very clear. I've gotten a lot of emails from people who had fathers, uncles, grandfathers who worked for the NYPD during the time of Son of Sam, and they always knew that the official story wasn't accurate, but they wanted to stay anonymous. And so we know, in my opinion, the NYPD is also kind of a culprit in this saga, and that's what's really concerning to me as an American in general, is just when a law enforcement agency allegedly is not working for the betterment of the people and is hiding things. That's very concerning. And so yeah. Well, I'm going to hand it over to you guys now and let you guys start your starting point with this John Carr. Now, I want to, for my audience too, John Carr, again, the story is that he unalived himself, correct, in North Dakota because he was serving in the military. Is that correct? Even though he was not serving in the military at the time. He was at the Minot Air Force Base. Technically, he was not allowed to be on base, living on base. And we'll go into that more in detail later on. But he was from Yonkers, where all of this happened. Yes. And then he ended up in North Dakota. If you've read Maury Terry's book, The Ultimate Eagle, he talks about going to North Dakota to look into. I honestly, no offense to people from North Dakota, I didn't know anyone actually lived in North Dakota. I thought it was just a mystical land that no one went to.
Well,
But
if you want to live there, I mean, there's like no trees. It gets sub-zero in the winter. You talk about a wind chill. If it hits like 10 below and then you get a wind chill, you could be talking about 30, 40 below, and no, thank you.
no, thank you. I mean, Fargo. Think about, is that your friend in the wood chipper there? But
Yes.
that's North Dakota, guys. Very far from where I live, where Jonathan lives, and where Chris lives.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was in North Dakota, you know, with the military based or not, even not even supposed to be there, is interesting. And I know there was actually, and we might get into it, but wasn't there actually evidence that there was a satanic cult in the town? Working in the town?
There is heavy occult activity in that area, yes. And I am in contact with somebody that is up north that has connections. He doesn't directly work with law enforcement, but he's very credible and he has connections to people who are in law enforcement. And he's very familiar with the occult activity up in that area and the people that were allegedly connected.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to believe that the story is not accurate, because this is a highly credible source.
Right. Well, with that being said, I'm gonna mute myself, guys, and I'm gonna take my I'm gonna take my camera off just so it's not weird for you guys. But should we just mention my hair quickly?
Your hair looks really great. I don't think it looks stringy at all. It looks shiny. What kind of hair product do you use on your hair, by the way? Because it looks fabulous.
I have tons of hair products. Today I actually used a purple shampoo because I'm blonde, and so most blonde have to put a little purple in sometimes to keep it fresh. And no, I have very, very thick, actually very thick hair. So
I get that, because my hair I've let my hair go white, so I have to use something on my hair to make it look decent.
Yeah.
But so what product do you use?
Oh, I use tons of products. I use a lot of stuff from Whole Foods, like the Avalon Organic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but I think the person that said that, I guess he just doesn't run his hands through women's hair that much. So, no, bro, my hair is, it's the one thing I got from my dad that I really appreciate is my thick hair. So yeah, so I have to straighten it. Actually, if I didn't straighten it, it would be out to here. So I have to actually straighten it. So anyway, yeah, so I'll just leave that there, and I'm going to take myself off camera. But yeah, it's super thick. So anyway, all right, you guys.
You're not going to be off camera through the whole thing, though, are you?
I can put my camera back on anytime you want, but I want to take the attention off of me. I think it's distracting for our audience. I want the attention to be on you guys. So just
because your hair is beautiful. I think your audience should see how beautiful your hair is for however long we're on.
Well, thank you. And you guys, we have I think this troll might have a little bit of a crush on me because he seems to watch my channel and I never watch his. So
well, that you might have a point about that, because it's kind of like whenever you know how there are bullies in elementary school or middle school that just go and pick on people on the playground, and then you find out years later that person actually had a crush on you and they just wanted attention. Maybe that's it. You might have a point.
Yeah, and I he called me a zombie Paris Hilton, and apparently I have stringy hair. Manny, I'm taken. I'm in a very committed relationship. Bro, sorry about that. Better luck next time. But all right, so I'm going to take myself off camera and I'm going to let you guys take over from here. I can't wait to hear what you guys, I always learn from you guys, so I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say.
Okay.
Well, thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for coming.
Well, first I'm going to go over with your audience the difference between a coroner and a medical examiner, because a lot of people don't understand that. I did cover that before on the podcast that we did on Karen Wallstrom.
Editing Bryce here, you guys. We had some feedback on the microphones on StreamYard, so we had to pause our recording and switch over to Zoom. So you're going to see the application change. But since we have a break here anyway, I think this is a good time to go ahead and throw our sponsorship video in. Hold on a few minutes and we will get back to the show. Ashtanga yoga is considered to be one of the hardest forms of yoga out there. It is one of the 3 remaining lineage-based yogas, and it is also considered to be the punk rock of yoga. Part of what makes Ashtanga so hard is the jump back and jump through sequencing that is held in all 6 series. So if you're ready to take your Ashtanga practice to the next level, then you're going to love this new workshop video created specifically for you on Fusion Body Studio by senior teacher Todd Roderick. This is a mastery class that's designed to help you unlock that light floating strength that you've probably always wanted. If you've ever wondered how people make these transitions look effortless, this is where you learn the secret. Core activation, bandha engagement, shoulder stability, and the smooth rhythm of breath that carries your body through space. This class is low pressure, step by step, and accessible for every level. Whether you're refining your flow or starting from the basics, you'll build confidence, control, and that signature Ashtanga glide. And right now, you can get 20% off your first 6 months at Fusion Body Studio with discount code BRICE20. That's BRICE 20. That's unlimited classes, mobility training, strength flows, breath work, and more, anytime, anywhere. So if you're ready to lift, float, and flow with power, join us at Fusion Body Studio. Unlock your potential, and don't forget to use the discount code at checkout. Everything you need to start your journey is down in the description box below. Now back to the show. All right, you guys, no, you're not crazy. We actually just switched streaming devices, but because we had some interference with StreamYard, and so we are now back on my private Zoom account. I was telling John and Chris that StreamYard, the one drawback to StreamYard is that it's very easy to hack. If other people are using StreamYard, I don't know how to hack because I don't know how to do that stuff, nor am I interested in hacking anybody's. I got enough drama of my own in my life to care about somebody else's drama, but I know we were talking about that. So if that was hacking, jokes on you. We're on even more secured streaming network now, and so your screen did change. But we're gonna pick up again with Chris going through her blog that she was going through before the feedback started coming. So I'm going to take myself off the camera and let you guys just resume back what we were doing. So take it away, guys.
Okay, so I am going to discuss the difference between a coroner and a medical examiner. So a coroner in many older and rural systems, the coroner is elected or an appointed official who may or may not have medical training. Their role is administrative and investigative. They certify deaths and can order an autopsy, but they often rely on forensic pathologists in order to perform the actual exam. Now, a medical examiner in modern systems, the medical examiner is a licensed physician, usually with specialized training in forensic pathology. Medical examiners personally perform autopsies, determine the cause and manner of death, and provide expert testimony in court. Now, there is a difference. A coroner may lean heavily on law enforcement's initial assessments, while the medical examiner system places scientific expertise at the center of the investigation. In a self-inflicted wound inquiry, this can be the difference between ruling a case closed prematurely or uncovering a staged foul play. So going into how to handle a investigation, the general principles include always assume the worst case scenario. It's homicide until proven otherwise. Homicides can be staged to resemble accidents. A systematic and accurate investigation is required to detect deception. The cause of death at the scene is only the apparent cause. The actual cause is determined by the medical examiner or pathologist via an autopsy. Examine the crime scene promptly and thoroughly. Look for signs of a struggle or defensive wounds. Note the position and location of any weapons. Collect records of all witness statements, which should include documented police reports. Errors in an early interpretation, such as misidentifying a wound type, can derail an entire investigation. There is a difference between expertise and experience. Only forensic pathologists determine the cause of death. Success depends on cooperation between investigators and the medical examiner. And for the role of meteorological investigators, in some jurisdictions, MLIAs respond to death scenes. They are often physicians' assistants with advanced training in medicine and death investigation. They assist the medical examiner in determining the cause and manner of death. So when you're investigating a possible self-inflicted, there should be key questions that should be asked. Could the deceased have produced the injuries themselves? Do the injuries align with self-infliction? Was the deceased mentally or emotionally distressed prior to death? Was there a history of prior attempts? There are numerous different types of methods that are used for self-infliction, and people can refer to my blog for that. Scene examination is important. So anybody who conducts a scene examination should use a detailed and cautious inspection. They should look for weapons and toxic agents normally found near the body. Absence of a weapon undermines the theory. Blood stains, such as presence on hands or weapon grip, is not always proof of self-infliction. Mismatched blood patterns between hands and a weapon raise suspicion. Postmortem staging. Weapons may be placed in the victim's hand after rigor mortis sets in. So there are also locked room cases, such as a locked room may suggest self-infliction or a natural death. Investigators must consider external manipulation of doors, locks, or windows. Look for unusual marks on latches, hinge, or frames. And in side notes, they should conduct a thorough search of the scene, home, and workplace. Notes are often in plain view near the body, written earlier and left elsewhere, distributed across multiple locations, mailed to friends or family. Notes should be examined by a document examiner and, if necessary, a forensic linguistic to confirm authorship. And then there's motive and background. Gather information from relatives, friends, and medical professionals. Consider motives such as terminal illness, psychiatric disorders, family or financial problems, bullying, trauma, and stress. Review social media, although social media obviously didn't occur, it wasn't there at the time, but I'm going to go ahead and include this anyhow, which includes harassing comments from others. This is needed for surviving relatives if they choose to litigate for online social media harassment. And as for ballistics and scene management, account for the number of bullets fired and corresponding cartridges. Rope off outdoor crime scenes immediately. Weather can destroy ballistic evidence. Quickly determine firing direction. Twigs, leaves, and foliage may show bullet paths. Such traces fade into surrounding environment within hours. So self-inflicted wounds by you need to find common wound sites, such as the forehead, temple, heart, or mouth, which handedness the person is, such as right or left-handed, whether the wound track matches the victim could have achieved. Wounds are most likely close range. Weapons should lie in a plausible position and relative to the body. Powder burns, tattooing near the wound. Blood or tissue spatter found on the firing hand. Marks from firing, gases on the thumb, forefinger, or web of the hand. Removal of obstructing clothing before firing. Indicators of homicide or staging the weapon. And then you need to look at long-barreled weapons, and I won't go into further detail with some of these others. You need to look at how the clothing was examined. You need to look at post-mortem indicators. You need to look at scene integrity. And then other things, investigators should have a working knowledge of wounds and scene analysis. The final cause of death determination lies with the medical examiner, pathologist by current standards, and success relies on teamwork between investigators and forensic experts. So from here, I guess we can discuss John Carr's untimely death. Do you want to start out, John?
Well, I mean, I don't. I guess all I would say was that the circumstances were unusual, and the weapon was extremely unusual. This is not a weapon that someone would normally use to self-delete.
Okay, what type of weapon did he use, John?
This was a rifle, which is just. I mean, I won't go into.
Okay, I believe I believe that he had a prior attempt with a 30-30 rifle, right? And a 30-30 rifle is what was found at his residence, and he also had a .44 Colt. But the 30-30 was what was used on him, if I'm accurate.
Yes, but
Okay.
it's just such a. I mean, just the obvious factor that you're trying to do this with a long-barreled weapon. I mean, there would have been so many easier ways to accomplish that if in fact he self-deleted.
Well,
it would have been a very unusual process with a weapon like that.
Well, it seems to me, and there's such a lack of documentation on his death. Like I have placed a Freedom of Information Act on him. They don't have any surviving records. I'm still trying to obtain records from other sources, but it doesn't look like there's anything out there, including the DA tapes that state how well the scene was actually evaluated to determine, okay, was the rifle used? I don't know how to explain this. Was like a string attached to the weapon? Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
Based on how long the rifle was, and all the other circumstances surrounding the death, they would have wanted to look into little things like that to see if he was actually able, based on his height and the trajectory, to launch the mechanism in order to self-inflict. And I don't see any type of evidence in the DA tape that they explored that. And you think that they would have made note of that if there were strings or anything else at the scene, and they would have thoroughly examined his hands, his toes, and other factors.
Absolutely, and I've never seen any indication that they did that either. It was just so. And a few years ago, when I spoke to one of the law enforcement officers who claims to have responded at the time and who had some prior history with John Carr's situation out there in Minot, he didn't clarify the issue at all. In fact, it just his account raised more questions.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about the DA tape, is that the DA tapes raise more questions than answers, especially considering many of them are very one-sided, and they're just dictating answers back into a recording.
Yes.
I have a question for you guys. I know I have seen a photo somewhere of his body when they found his body, the way it was laid out.
I believe it might have been in Maury Terry's book, and I would assume I would assume it's been taken out since then, because it's not necessarily the best judgment call, in my opinion, to include pictures of people.
I thought, but I can't find it in the book, and I'm like, where did I see that picture?
Yeah.
Because
it was in the original, but and it's a jarring photo. Yeah,
it's very jarring. And I don't know if I'm overlooking, because I thought it was in the book, but now I'm anyway, guys.
You're right, because I mean that was very prevalent in the 80s, such as like in my area of the country, and you're probably not familiar with him. There was a serial killer called named Bob Berdella, and Tom Strickland wrote a book on him, and he included very graphic pictures of the victims, because Berdella was taking pictures of himself with them. And I believe, I don't know if there were any other additions to the book written, but I don't believe the book has been republished. But the pictures were jarring and way worse than this example, and they should have never been included in the book. But anyhow, that's just my opinion.
It is very, very jarring, but I know, even I remember from reading it, and I've read The Ultimate Evil twice now, but Maury Terry does kind of go into some detail about how weird this whole situation was. Do we want to talk about the day of his unaliving? The official narrative is he self-deleted. I don't think he self-deleted. What do you guys think?
I will say that there would have been reason for them to believe that that could have happened based on his psychiatric history. He had prior attempts. There were arguments that he had a prior attempt with a 30-30 rifle that he admitted to. There was another attempt where I believe that he did, it was alleged that he did something with an ace bandage, and that wasn't confirmed or denied. And I believe that there was another attempt, and I'm not sure what the other attempt was. But he did have a psychiatric history. He did have a history of overdosing. So concluding that he could have self-deleted isn't unrealistic. All at the same time, you shouldn't jump to that conclusion because there's also documentation that he was functioning fairly well prior to his death. He had opened up a PO box and he paid 6 months for it. He had opened up a checking and savings account with Minot State Bank. It would be interesting to know who the beneficiary was on the account because they never explored that, according to the DA tapes. I think that's important to look into if there were any financial incentives for it, if somebody could have had a motive. And what was the other thing? Oh, he was planning on going back to college. He had completed VA paperwork, which was needed in order for college reentry. So there are indicators that he was functioning well, but yet they immediately ruled it. And there was a medical examiner who performed everything, but it seems like they relied heavily on law enforcement's opinion. I find the whole scenario confusing.
Yeah, I would say he was capable of harming himself, but the circumstances under which this actually happened seem conspicuously odd.
Yeah, and I mean we can talk further about why he was even on the Minot Air Force Base. His girlfriend Linda O'Connor was in the middle of a separation from Craig O'Connor. Craig O'Connor was living off of base. Linda O'Connor was living on base for free, I believe. I don't believe she was having to pay. But technically, when you're separated per Air Force Base policy, and this is according to Mazish because she was stationed at Minot in one point in her life. Once you're separated, you're not legally allowed to still be living on base. And Linda O'Connor was still living on base. That means that if John Carr was coming on base and she was waiting him on base and he was staying there, that was also not allowable. So there's a residency problem there. There's another person that was listed in the DA tapes, and nobody seems to know anything about him at this point. Michael Monroe. He wasn't listed in the phone book up to, I think it was about 77, but then he shows up at the residence maybe like around 78. But he's also showing a residence there. And whenever the DA looked into if he had any military records related to Minot Air Force Base, they couldn't find any. So why these people were staying on the Minot Air Force Base and not being actively questioned is unknown.
Yeah, it seems like allowances were made around this circle of people, and yeah, that they were not subject to the rules that everyone else was subject to on the base.
Oh yeah, and I mean, do you have any thoughts about? I'm going to be blunt. I'm a little confused about how the person would have gotten access. Whoever would have been responsible if he did not self-delete, if he was actual homicide. how the person who did it would have gotten on base, or if they would have already been on base. It seems like there was a window for opportunity, and maybe you can discuss more what happened, John, with the circumstances surrounding when Linda O'Connor came back for money. I believe you said that she was at some party and then she came back.
She apparently was in, it was a study group or something. So she had left the base housing. But yeah, as May has pointed out, it would have been very difficult for somebody to just hop onto the base and then hop back off after this was over, assuming that John did not self-delete and that it was a homicide. It would have been very difficult for someone to get in and get back out after this was done. I don't. And then to go back to my conversation with the retired law enforcement officer, he claims, and he told the story to me exactly the same way twice in a row. He claims that, in fact, the way that the situation has been described, that it wasn't that way at all, that he was at the door responding, and that he was speaking to Linda O'Connor as the gun went off. I don't believe he's remembering this correctly. I believe he's possibly remembering another incident to which he responded at some point on the base, but I don't think this is, in fact, the way that the circumstances around John Carr's death actually were. I think the retired officer has confused this with another incident.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to pull up my blog really fast? Bryce, the Open Doors, Bitter Nights, and a Life Cut Short, John Charles Christopher Carr at Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota. If you pull it up, you can see the Minot map. Mazish provided this to me, and you can see where the main entrance is. You can see approximately where John Carr lived. You can see where the south gate was. I believe that his death occurred after 5 o'clock. I don't have the exact time, but like the south gate, I've looked into this myself. It would have been closed around 5 p.m. So it's likely that the person, if they came on base, they would not have exited through the south gate. They would have exited through the main gate. And based on weather conditions at the time, it would have been hard for speed limit wise to maneuver on and off the base fairly rapidly. There was also a blizzard around that time period, so the roads would not have been cleared off particularly well. The speed limit on Missile Avenue is roughly about 15 miles per hour. You probably would have needed to drive a lot slower during those type of road conditions.
Yeah.
And then once you get into the residential area, it's going to even be slower. And then you start looking at Linda O'Connor's account. She needed to fill up with gas. She came back to get money. She got it out of his wallet. It doesn't say in the DA tape if she ever saw him whenever she came back to get money out of his wallet, which I find alarming. I don't understand why the DA did not question her and say, well, did you see him? Did you talk to him when you got the $5 out of his wallet? Then she goes to the gas station because she needs to fill up, because she said that she was on walk, which means that she was almost out of gas. The nearest gas station is Ruthville, which is close to 5 miles away. So you're talking about in blizzard conditions needing to drive slowly on the highway on 83. You're around an Air Force base, which, you have to drive slow in those areas anyhow. I believe that the speed limit now has been lowered to like 55 miles per hour off of 83. So you're driving slow to the gas station in post-blizzard conditions. You're driving back. You have to get on base by showing your ID, and then you have to drive slowly on base. And that allows for about maybe an hour to an hour and 15-minute window for whoever did it, if it was not a self-inflicted wound. to get on and off base. Mazish tends to think that the person would have been already on base.
I have a question for you guys. This might be random, but it goes into John Carr's, this mystery around him. When I was looking for the picture, I stumbled upon, and this might be not new to you guys, I stumbled upon the Unsolved Mysteries episode, looks like from when Robert Stack was still alive. I mean, it's on their website, because I was looking for the picture and I hit images. Have you
Yes.
guys seen the comments? I was reading through the comments. I mean, of course, Manny Grossman is not a reliable source, in my opinion, but we've got people here. There was one comment, where did it go, talking about daughter of Nick. And of course, we don't know who these people are, but I know for a fact that Berkowitz knew the Carr brothers. My father was stationed at Minot Air Force Base. He and his buddies went out to a local dealer's house to pick up some, we'll say, candy. For YouTube purposes, you guys can see what that is, though. My father and his friends entered the house to get the candy. This was John Carr's house. He stated that the entire encounter was so bizarre, and they were getting what they came for. He couldn't help but wonder who the weird guy was in the rocking chair. The man sat silently, just rocking back and forth. The room was so quiet. At one point, all that could be heard was the rocking of the chair. The man never said a word, just stared at them while rocking back and forth, back and forth. When they left the house, my father asked one of his buddies about the guy in the chair. He was told that it was John's friend, Berkey. Not much was thought of that night until Son of Sam, Unaliver, was arrested in New York. As soon as my father...
I'm going to have to be blunt. I don't know if I believe that story.
Yeah,
Berkey
there's
rocking
some
back
other...
and forth in a chair. I think that's urban legend. I can't see that. But I mean, if a person wants to come forward and give their name and give more information to corroborate what they're saying, I think that's cool. But just making some type of post like that, I don't know if I particularly find that credible, but that's my personal opinion.
There are some other, yeah, and we don't know who these people are, but there are some other interesting comments here. Like here, there are Son of Sand connections in North Dakota, Bismarck, and Minot, maybe more. There was a cave out by University of Mary they used for satanic rituals. Anyway, there's a lot. There's one person that kept saying, I was there, I was there. I was there, but the police won't listen to what I have to say. It's just interesting. I was kind of scanning through these comments, and I've never even thought to look at unsolved mysteries. I'll leave a link in the comment section below, or the description box below this video, guys, if you guys want to look. I actually tried to respond to someone, but I was involved. I had to create an account to do it. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, you guys. I was not aware that Unsolved Mysteries had actually covered this from the point of a satanic cult.
Yes, they had Maury on the show, and I will say that as a result of that show, when it originally aired, they received a lot of very relevant tips about cult activity in relation to the case. People started calling in, and in fact, someone called in with a very detailed tip, with all sorts of backstory to bolster it, about my favorite cult suspect, Suzanne Conway. So there was a lot of activity generated when that episode of Unsolved Mysteries originally aired.
What was the result? I mean, I guess we kind of know the result of that, but do you think they were shut down by higher ups, or... Because that's pretty enlightening that a lot of tips were called. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch that episode, but just the comments alone that I was skimming through were very interesting to read. Whether they're accurate or not, there's a couple of them that kept saying, I was involved, no one will believe me. I don't know why you would admit to being involved in that, but unless you have a super guilty conscience and you're using a fake name. But that's very fascinating. Fascinating.
I believe it's very hard for people in that area, from my understanding, to talk about the case due to threats. And I mean, it's a very clandestine landscape up in North Dakota. You just don't. It's a culture of you just don't talk in that area, or it can get you in trouble. So, why a person would not want to use their real name, I completely understand why.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't know, anybody can write anything on the internet, but I just never even stumbled upon I never even thought about Unsolved Mysteries having a website, and just looking for the picture of John Carr, I was like, wow, there's actually a lot of interesting comments. Again, I tried to respond to one to get them to contact me back, but I had to set up an account, all that kind of stuff. So I couldn't respond right away on his show, but I just thought that was very fascinating. Anyway, continue. In the rabbit holes, there's just a plethora of rabbit holes in this case, isn't there? It just
There
never
is, yeah.
stops.
There's all kinds of avenues you can go down and just get completely lost in them. There really are.
Yeah, well, how about you discuss his travel, John, where he traveled with Linda O'Connor and Craig O'Connor down to Texas, and then also he traveled elsewhere, Denver, and also over to Florida.
Yeah, well, John seems to have had a regular route that he traveled, going all over the country and meeting different people. The curious thing about this is, I mean, at least according to Linda O'Connor, and of course, we don't have the benefit of hearing the actual tape. We don't know all the things that she said. She's quoted fairly extensively in Maury's book, but on the People versus Berkowitz site, we just hear Michael Armienti, one of the assistant Queens District Attorneys, reciting some very general points from the interview with her. So there's all kinds of things that we don't hear, but Linda does tell Armienti at some point in the interview that she doesn't know who John Carr's friends or acquaintances were in Denver and when he travels to Panama City, Florida. Likewise, she doesn't know who John's friends or acquaintances are in Panama City. Linda brings up the fact that John owned a house in Panama City, Florida at one time. He was stationed down there. There's a lot of unanswered questions, particularly with regard to Panama City. For me, I know the area because my family used to vacation down there.
Hey, you guys, since I do have an international audience here, I just wanted to cut in here, edit this a little bit to let you guys know about Panama City Beach for those who are not familiar with it. When Jonathan mentioned that John Carr had a house in Panama City, I got goosebumps, chill bumps down my spine. Most Americans probably understand why when we know what this religion looks for. So let me give you guys a little bit of information for those who are not from the United States about Panama City Beach in the late 1970s. In the late 1970s, Panama City Beach was still a working-class beach town. Instead of high-rise condos and luxury resorts, the coastline was lined with small motels, family-owned hotels, and modest vacation rentals. Hand-painted vacancy signs were common, and most visitors arrived by car, station wagons packed with coolers, beach chairs, and kids in the back seat. This was a destination, a vacation destination for Southern and Midwestern families, retirees, military families from nearby bases, and road trippers looking for sun without the price tag. Panama City thrived because it was easy to reach. Visitors drove from Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and beyond. Summer tourism was busy, but winters were quiet and local. This made the town appealing not just to vacationers, but to people passing through. Seasonal workers, short-term renters, and those looking to blend into a crowd where no one asked many questions. In the late 1970s, Panama City's reputation was mostly wholesome. Family-friendly by day, a little rough around the edges at night in certain pockets, but not nationally known for crime or controversy. It was a place where people could relax, stay a while, and leave without drawing attention. The mix, tourists, locals, temporary workers, and transients was common in many Gulf Coast towns at that time. Panama City sat right at the crossroads between old school beach communities and the much louder destination it would become known for in the decades that follow. So, you guys, Panama City Beach now is known as like a party town. It's not super family friendly. I mean, there are some families that still go there for vacation, but it's definitely known as like a hardcore party town. But this is important to understand what Jonathan is saying about Panama City Beach in the 1970s, because again, we are looking at why would John Carr, this guy from Yonkers, New York, care to buy a house in this particular Gulf town. So think about that for a second, about all the vacationers, the kids that were going down there in the 1970s. Anyway, you guys, back to the show.
So I was very interested when I read Maury's book for the first time when he said that John was, in fact, stationed in Panama City. John's ex-wife told police investigators that if she remembered correctly, the years that he was stationed there were roughly 1969 to 1971. Now, May looked up the property records, and apparently the house that John and his ex-wife purchased down there was not purchased until 1972. So the ex-wife's memory may not have been entirely accurate on that point, but John did purchase a house down there. And the address, May was able to look that up, and that is known.
Is it documented when he sold the house?
Well, it's apparently what happened is they bought the house in 72. In 74, John signed over power of attorney to his ex-wife. So I'm not sure if the house was sold at some point. The impression, again, we don't know all the things that Linda said in her interview, but we have part of the Tom Taylor interview. Tom Taylor was a friend or acquaintance of John Carr's in North Dakota. Tom is asked point blank at one point, did John own a house in Panama City? And Tom says yes. And the interviewer says, what state is that in? And Tom says, Florida, I believe. Now, this is very unusual because Tom Taylor was sort of a scattered, drug-addled person, and this is reflected in his interview. And he concedes that he had a, quote, piss-poor memory, and that he didn't have a memory for names, and he has to answer a lot of the questions as, I don't know, I don't remember, Yet he remembers that John Carr owned a house in Panama City, Florida at one point. So in what context did that ever come up, in his conversations with John? It's an unusual point that he would remember that. It indicates that John apparently talked about this house or this location fairly often, so that this one detail did stick in Tom Taylor's memory for some reason. And John, he was there, according to Linda O'Connor, John was in Panama City as late as the summer of 1977, which indicates that he had some long-term connection to the area, that he had friends that he went back there to see, or some situation that he was tending to in the area. Yet Linda says she doesn't know what it was. She doesn't know who John's friends were down there. She doesn't know if he had any friends down there, doesn't know where he stayed while he was there, and doesn't know how long he stayed when he was there. And Tom Taylor, too, says that John was very close-mouthed about his travels, that he did not talk about, in any detail. When he came back to Minot, he did not talk in any detail about where he had been or what he had done while he was there. So that whole situation is very unusual.
I would agree that it's unusual, because you would also think with the FOIA release with the DA tapes that they would have followed up with John Carr's ex-wife, because it seems like they were on at least amicable terms. He thought that she was a good mother, and that they were still having interactions because of the daughter. And if the property was transferred over to her, technically, if they were on good terms, if he traveled to Panama City and she still owned the house, whenever he went to Panama City, did he stay at the house? Where was he staying?
Right.
I don't see any evidence that the district attorney ever did an interview with her, unless they're holding it back, and another Freedom of Information Act needs to be requested. But that's something that the district attorney should have followed up on.
Right. No, she was interviewed, and that at least part of that interview, or the reference is not direct quotations, is on the People versus Berkowitz site.
Okay.
But her memory was at least somewhat hazy because she could not remember the exact address, which caused some confusion in finding it. And she recalled that they were only there from 1969 to 71. Yet
Okay.
property records show that the house was purchased in 72. So there is considerable confusion about this time in John's life when they lived in Panama City, and the ex-wife seems to have blotted out some of her conscious memory about this time, deliberately or not. It raises some very interesting questions, and I will say just in passing, because I know the area so well. In fact, my family stayed there often during this period, and I can tell you that from a very young age, and yeah, we used to talk about this, and we joked about it for years afterward within my family. There were rumors of occult activity in Panama City at the time. People used to joke about the quote-unquote devil worshippers down there. Was there anything to this rumor? Is this something John Carr or his circle in that region could have been connected to? I don't know, but the rumors even in the late 70s were very prevalent down there. They were associated in particular with one beachfront motel. I know the name of the place, and I know for a fact that the motel even had to issue a public statement in the form of like a leaflet or a pamphlet that they had nothing to do with this sort of activity. But the rumors were very prevalent down there, indeed, at that time, and for years afterward.
Okay. That's interesting. So this interview, I don't see it in the form of a district attorney tape interview. So it's just in the form of a transcribed interview elsewhere on the website.
It is, yeah. Let me see if I can find it. I'm going to go look for that now.
Okay.
But I'll find it, and if you want to continue, and I'll provide the direct link for you guys here in just a minute.
That's fine. I mean, you can do it after the podcast too. It's not important to do it right now. So, I mean, moving on to like Craig O'Connor. Do you have anything that you want to add about what Craig O'Connor said in his district attorney tape interview? I mean, it wasn't directly his voice, and it was being fed back.
Right there again,
to Linda O'Connor, because it doesn't. Like, I find the lack of follow-up by the district attorney on this and just taking them as at their word bothersome.
Oh, sure. Well, and you know, the problem with when the investigation was reopened by the Queens District Attorney John Santucci in 1979, it was shut down again very abruptly from above. And unfortunately, I think there were a lot of points that Santucci didn't get to follow up on, and I think that he regretted that, but the case, when he reopened it, it was shut down again very abruptly. So unfortunately, there probably were a lot of things that he just did not get the opportunity to follow up on. I believe he saw the many discrepancies in the case, and was concerned about them. He always was worried about that, because he stated, unequivocally many years later, that he did not believe that Berkowitz acted alone, that there was abundant evidence that he had accomplices in the case. So Santucci was really clear, in his personal statement on that.
Well, what do you think about Linda O'Connor's statement on her DA tape that Craig could have been involved in taking drugs from the ER and allegedly doing something with them that would not have been legal? But she also said at the same time, they did actively question her whether whether it was relevant, and her response was, I believe the line of questioning was related to whether John Carr could have had something on Craig O'Connor that would have made him feel intimidated. And I'm just paraphrasing. And she said that if he would have done anything to threaten Craig O'Connor, she would have kicked him out, and she would not have tolerated that. That she and Craig had an amicable relationship, which the lack of exploration there in and of itself, based on what John Carr was involved in. It is stated throughout the DA tapes that he had a substance abuse problem, and that he was also allegedly involved in some type of dealing with narcotics. To not explore that further, I find to be bothersome.
Oh, I mean, there definitely was material there that should have been delved into further. There's no question about that. And judging from the quotes that we get in Maury's book regarding Linda, her general demeanor throughout this investigation was very odd. She was defiant. She was defensive. At one point, they asked her, do you not understand that it's a crime to, or at least potentially it could be a crime to withhold information from investigators? And she said something to the effect of, well, I don't think that applies to me, or something like that. Linda, my general impression of her is that she already knew that she had been granted some sort of special status in this investigation, that she wasn't going to be subject to the normal investigatory rules, and she could sort of say what she wanted to, or conduct herself in the manner that she wanted to, that she felt that she was going to be essentially immune from any criminal charges in the course of this investigation.
So just basically she wasn't put under the same type of scrutiny. Yeah. So she just wasn't under the same type of scrutiny as maybe other people might have been under. Am I reading you correct on that?
It feels that way. Yeah, it feels that like ahead of time she had already been told, you're in the clear. Don't worry about this. It was just a very, very odd investigation, but her demeanor especially I found odd.
I mean, from my personal opinion, from a blood spatter and trace evidence perspective, are you bothered at all that they allowed Craig to take the waterbed and take it into his possession? Because John Carr committed suicide, inflicted himself.
It's okay, Chris. I think we're further enough into the video, so no worries.
Okay. Well, he committed suicide, if he did commit suicide, near the waterbed. If it was a homicide, it was near the waterbed. Yet the waterbed was Craig O'Connor's, and it was moved afterwards. It was not taken into evidence, from my understanding. It should have been, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
Craig O'Connor moved it to his residence, and why? That's a procedural red flag. You're talking about evidence preservation, chain of custody, witness reliability were all compromised before the formal investigation could even begin. I mean,
absolutely. And for people who have never seen the photos that we were talking about earlier, John's body was found wedged between the side of the bed and the wall of this Air Force Base housing. So the body was right there between the bed and the wall. So yes, extremely odd that they did not take this bed as evidence. Yes.
What do you think about Linda O'Connor says in her interview that she could have ID'd? She obviously questions whether he committed suicide or whether it was a homicide. That is very evident in her defense throughout the reading of the district attorney tape, even though it's not in her words. All the same, I don't know, maybe you have something you want to add. I'm kind of blanking out.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just, I can't really, I mean, it would be so much more helpful for us if we could actually hear the recording of her interview, so it's, I just found her reactions odd. I mean, where she described, memories of John and his general behavior and at least somewhat their relationship, although I would say overall their actual relationship remains somewhat murky in this narrative. I didn't get the impression from her that there was it was not an affectionate relationship. You know, they allegedly were in a quote unquote relationship, but she doesn't sound in the aftermath very, it doesn't actually sound like she liked John much. Maybe I'm getting the wrong impression there, but it seems the way she describes the relationship after the fact seems sort of cold and detached to me.
Well, she does vacillate. That's my opinion. She starts out with saying how she and John met, and they met through a psychology course at Minot. What is it? Minot Community College. Is that it?
Yeah.
And that he came over to pick up notes for an exam, and that's how he also met Craig, and that the three of them became good friends. And then by the end of the conversation through the DA tapes, it seems like she was really trying to distance herself from him and show that she had priority over her relationship with Craig O'Connor over John Carr. Yet she still had questions whether John could have committed suicide or if it was a homicide. And I think it's also telling that she was storing film of John in a freezer.
That is another very odd detail. Yeah.
I mean, moving and still, and were the pictures developed? What was in the pictures? Why was she storing them in the freezer? And then there's also the person who John thought was threatened by, that he said this person was going to kill me. How well was that person looked into? There's no DA tape on that person. It's nowhere on the website. There's no transcript of interviews. I believe me, I would have found it on this guy by now.
Well, he was spoken with. They did speak with that individual.
They did, but he's not on the People versus David Berkowitz.
Well, no, that's true. That's true. There, bizarrely enough, there are a lot of key interviews that are not there, and I do think that yes, that raises further questions.
Well, yeah, because I mean, what was the suspect? You would have to say, okay, why? If he could have gotten on base, what would have been the reasons for him being able to get access on base? Was he military? Did he have some type of business association there where he could have gotten on base to get access? I mean, there are all sorts of lingering questions that the district attorney should be asking, and I would say people should be asking years later if they're going to question if John Carr committed suicide or if it was a homicide. And I would say, including the time frame when he came back. I mean, the date that he came back from New York to the date that he died.
Oh yes, I mean it's an investigation that's still wide open, and that it could be re-explored even now, and if official means were granted to do that, absolutely.
Well, it's going to be hard unless there are existing documents somewhere that can be found surrounding his death. Police reports, autopsy reports. I know that the Office of Special Investigations did not believe that the investigation was handled properly. I have my own opinions about Lieutenant Terry Gardner. I do not think that he handled the investigation properly, and neither did apparently the OSI person, Rick Farron. I think it's entirely inappropriate that Lieutenant Gardner was mailed Anatomy of Witchcraft. And I have been advised that this book used to be John Carr's book. The book should have been fingerprinted. Tests should have been done on the book. It wasn't done. And this book was taken out of chain of custody, and it's allegedly in Terry Gardner's ex-wife's property. I don't think that's appropriate. And at one point in the district attorney tape interviews, the person interviewing him, and I believe it was Herb Leifer, made the comment, well, that Anatomy of Witchcraft book would be worth some money at some point. That is so inappropriate to say during an interview process, attaching money to a book that has David Berkowitz's handwriting in it whenever it's involved in a criminal investigation.
Oh yes, absolutely. No disagreement there at all.
Yeah. So beyond that, apparently from the DA tape, the OSI, I believe that some people have said that Glenn Geetson was the first person to show up at the scene. It's unknown whether who actually showed up at the scene at first. It said that the first person that Linda O'Connor called was Craig O'Connor. She didn't call the police first. And then Craig O'Connor had been heavily using marijuana. He was confused about the point of the call at first, and then he realized, oh, it's John Carr died. He called friends of his that worked for the ER. They all went to the residence. It's unclear whether they showed up first or if Lieutenant Terry Gardner showed up first or Glenn Geetson. But if other people showed up other than law enforcement first, that contaminates the crime scene. That's a problem. And then you look at the OSI interview, and Rick Farron says that Lieutenant Terry Gardner was the first at the scene. I believe other people have said that Geetson was the first at the scene. I would think that the OSI person would know who showed up at the scene first.
Well, Geetson is the person that I spoke to, and in fact, yes, he claims that he was first, but he also says and is adamant that Lindo was there and that he was talking to her at the door when the gun went off, and he says that John shot himself. So yeah, I mean, there's a whole, everybody has a different version, and the whole narrative is just a mess, unfortunately.
Well, one thing that seems to be consistent, and this bothers me with Lieutenant Terry Gardner, is that there was a blood spot in the dining room, and he instructed Linda O'Connor to wipe it up.
Yeah.
And that's not protocol. That's odd.
It is.
And arguably, the district attorney, they did their job, and they asked. She had 4 dogs. 2 of them were girls. 1 was spayed, and asked if either one of them could have been in heat at the time, and she said no. One of them was not due for heat for another month to 2 months, so the blood spot would not have been for that reason. But for a blood spot to be found in the dining room whenever he allegedly committed suicide, and it could have been a homicide in another room, it's not responsible not to take that blood spot and do testing on it, because you have to wonder how it got there.
Yeah.
And for him to instruct her to wipe it up, and it's documented according to the district attorney tapes, and verified across multiple sources. I mean, it existed. It's also in the diagram, apparently. That's completely inappropriate and raises investigative red flags.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just, and you do have to delve into it in a lot of detail like this for people to understand just how chaotic this investigation was. Now, whether that was by design or whether everybody did just sort of fall down on the job, who can say? But yeah, it was mishandled from the start.
I mean, I think that there are things where you can say it was mishandled, and it was a smaller town and they're not always equipped to handle these type of investigations. But at the same time, OSI, Rick Farron, they offered their help, and Gardner refused. And honestly, that police department didn't even have jurisdiction. And it's questionable why they were even handling the investigation. Military, if it was actual military death, it should have been handled by OSI. If it was non-military, I believe it should have been handled by the Ward County Sheriff. So it's questionable why Gardner was even there. And even Farron said that the whole investigation was handled quoting him sloppily. It was a sloppy investigation. And I don't understand why Gardner would have denied help from OSI. I just don't. Because it is as questionable as everything looked. And they should have been fully aware that John Carr should not have been on base. Linda O'Connor should not have been on base. And if there was somebody else that had also been living there that should not have been on base, Mike Monroe, that raises too many red flags, and they should have just let OSI take it over. That's my opinion.
I was going to ask that, Chris, because it was, even if it wasn't a base. So you would think out of all the homicides or whatever in the world, that would have been the cleanest investigation. But my question too is, how did John Carr's family, do we know how they reacted to this, or any alleged involvement on their part? What do you guys want to say about the Carr family, if anything at all?
I'll let John answer that.
Again, it's like I was talking about the generally odd demeanor of Linda O'Connor in her interaction with the investigators. And I think the same thing applies to the Carr family. I mean, it just, you've lost, well, they lost two sons. So you expect that maybe when they interact with investigators, maybe it's going to be, answers are going to be fragmented, chaotic, and they were, but it was in a way that, like, I don't know. I mean, overall, you listen to the taped interview with the family, and there's just a general weirdness or sort of off-key quality that comes across in the entire interview. It's like it's hard to pinpoint what's off, but something is off.
Does it seem performative in any way, like they're going through the motions? I guess what I'm asking, and you don't have to answer this because there's so much speculation. I have my opinions, I think, of what's going on here, but do you believe that the family was potentially, allegedly, in our opinions, for entertainment purposes only, not fact? Do you believe they were aware of what was going to happen to John?
I think specifically, I think John knew for many years that he was in some sort of trouble, and I think it would have been very difficult for the family not to have been aware of that too. I do think that something was, he felt like he was in a bad position for at least the last 6 years of his life, and I think that the people close to him, the people around him, must have been aware of that.
Yeah, there seems like there's a lot of conflicting accounts, though, of the people that surround him. Like you have Phil Falcon's account of him, in contrast to Linda O'Connor. Like, Phil Falcon makes it sound like John Carr wasn't a ladies' man and he couldn't get women. Yet he was in a relationship, it sounds like, with Linda O'Connor. Maybe Phil just wasn't around her or didn't know John that well to know that he was in a relationship with her. But there are other interesting things that Phil Falcon brings up in his interview. I don't consider him to be necessarily the most reliable person, but in other cases, I think he is reliable. It seems he says some things to contradict himself throughout the interview that raise suspicion, like what happened with the cat in the kitchen. I believe it happened, but he also says he wasn't there while making references that you would think, well, how would he know this happened if he wasn't there?
Right. He's initially reluctant to admit that a cat had been killed. He said they were doing stuff or, something to that effect. And then he finally, and they said, well, what kind of stuff? And he said, well, there was a cat. Well, what did they do with the cat? Well, they killed it. So yeah, there were things that he didn't want to connect himself to the incident too much.
He seemed more upset about how they used his art supplies without his permission than the cat itself. That was my opinion of him.
It got into his plaster of Paris, yeah.
And some of the comments that he made I found to be rather amusing. I don't know about you, John, whenever he went on about how a Native American's curse doesn't affect white men, and a white man's curse doesn't affect Native American. That it just doesn't happen. And I just want to say, historically, are you not familiar with Tecumseh's curse? And it makes him fairly unreliable and untrustworthy from an interview perspective.
Yeah, I think his shadiness comes across, and also, but yeah, he did. He said that he never saw John, as far as he could remember, with a date. That he said that he would try to approach women, but that there was something just so personally odd about him that nobody really wanted to get close to him or get to know him. Now there may be something to that, but in connection with this, Tom Taylor says that John initially, in the time that Taylor knew him, dated a lot of very young girls, like 13 to 15 years old, which is an interesting detail, especially in light of the John Wheaties reference in the Breslin letter.
13 is a big number in the occult. I will say the age 13 specifically. You look at the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case, that comes up a lot. And I fully believe that case is also connected to this group, this overriding satanic Luciferian occult religion.
Yeah, there's the number 13 does come up in the occult a lot, and from a numerological perspective, you'll see 4, 13, 22, 31, 40. Really anything that breaks down to 4.
That's, and of course they are it's a form of the Luciferian faith to be obsessed. It's interesting, John, you brought up the whole Panama City thing, and in the editing process, by the time you guys get to this part of the video, you will have already seen it. I am going to insert a little information about Panama City, because that struck me when you said that. Of course, John and I both live close to Panama City, and at first I kind of laughed to myself and I thought, Jesus, this shit's everywhere. But then I started thinking about it and I was like, wow, okay, well, the occult in this particular, not all the occult, some occult is not dangerous, but in the Luciferian side of it, they do use children. They use children because of their energy, their pure energy. So darkness can't create anything, only the light can create. So they take from the light and they invert. That's why they use animals like the cat, sadly, and children. And what is Panama City known for? Well, Panama City is a tourist destination. And I was actually looking up the late 1970s, and it seems even, now Panama City is kind of known for college kids go there a lot to party. It's a beach town in the Gulf of Mexico. But back in the late 1970s, it looks like it was way more family friendly, and there is a side to Panama City even today that's slightly family friendly. They have a lot of kids camps and stuff like that. But what an incredible opportunity to take some kids, right?
Oh, absolutely. And there were all kinds of amusement parks and arcades. Yep. It was all that back in the late 70s. So it was crawling with kids. I have so many pictures from my own childhood. My cousin and I, we were, it was kid central down there. It absolutely was.
It's a very ideal location to go shopping for your quote unquote supplies for rituals. And just like Disney World today is a great hub for, as we say on our channel, carpooling, because the T word gets kind of flagged here on YouTube. But they wouldn't have had to take the kids far, would they have, if they have, the whatever they consider their temple nearby. and parents are relaxed, parents are drinking, they're on their vacation too. And the 70s was a way more trusting time of allowing your kids just to run amok. And so that makes perfect sense. That, of course, I do think that, my first, this shit is literally everywhere. It's everywhere. That's the biggest shock, I think, in the past like 6 years of how prevalent this religion will say is. And then the second thing is, well, of course, especially in the 1970s, they're going to set up hubs of, in my opinion, of course, this is just my opinion based off of critical thinking and what I know of Panama City, because it is close to both Jonathan and me. What a handy place. It's like a supermarket for supplies for them, because there's kids it's crawling with kids. And
Yes.
So I'm curious. And of course, because I have my own thoughts about John Carr, and I've been I'll say very, very fortunate in the 6 years that I've been on this channel to have met and worked with a lot of whistleblowers who grew up in these types of families where this was their religion, and they've talked about how they hid the religion from others, how they were trained to not say things in public. And I'm really grateful to all of the whistleblowers, like the people that have been brave enough to come forward. I know they're putting their lives in danger, and I'm very grateful. I know it's embarrassing, it's very shameful, and I'm very grateful for all of them. And this to me reeks of, and this is just my opinion, guys. Again, this is not fact. We are allowed to, under our First Amendment, freedom of speech, we are allowed to have opinions. This is not fact. This is just my opinion. I feel like, and I'd love to hear y'all's perspectives, that the Carr family, in my opinion, reeks of SRA, reeks of satanic ritual abuse. I feel like this was this family's religion. And that's just my opinion. And I'm very suspicious of John Carr's demise. And it does seem like John Carr was very mentally unstable, but that instability to me reeks of PTSD, reeks of trauma. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
I don't know if I have any thoughts that I want to add on that other than just what's shown on the record. Like how everything's been mishandled. Like I'll read a little bit from my blog on Dr. Smith. That's the person that handled the autopsy from the morgue. So when the body arrived, apparently an attendant would sign it in, providing the name based on information from the scene. Once signed in, the morgue assumed control, and no independent verification by the pathologist, the next of kin, or friends was conducted. Fingerprints were not routinely taken at the morgue. That duty belonged to law enforcement at the scene. Dr. Smith had only witnessed Detective Gietzen take fingerprints in 3 unusual cases over his tenure, and he did not recall seeing Gietzen fingerprint Carr at the county morgue. The absence of independent verification introduces a critical gap in the chain of custody and identification, a gap that in the case where the cause of death is contested or unclear is essential to resolve. So the physical evidence itself presented unanswered questions. Carr's body, according to Dr. Smith, bore a gunshot wound from a long-barreled firearm. Suicide investigations involving long guns require careful consideration of a deceased's physical ability to discharge the weapon, particularly when a high-angle shot to the head is claimed. Standard protocol would suggest examining whether the individual could have held and fired the weapon without mechanical aid, such as a tow pull or string trigger. In Carr's case, there's no indication that such a mechanism was present, nor was any experiment conducted to test feasibility. This absence leaves open the question of whether shooting was physically plausible or self-inflicted. Then there's this substance abuse use. And on to Rick Farron. I mean, substance abuse use is important because if he'd been using, but the toxicology reports say that there was nothing in his body, it would have argued that a self-infliction would have been more challenging. Now, I know some have argued whether it's actually Carr's body based on the historical details in the case, like such as the height and so forth.
Oh,
But
Chris, I totally forgot about that conspiracy theory. There is a conspiracy theory, isn't it, that he ends up in Canada? Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I would want actual documentation showing like the autopsy report and everything before I would even make a comment on that. But
I'm laughing because that's the Mara Murray conspiracy as well, that she's up in Canada, and I don't believe it. I don't.
But he had a drug problem apparently, and the results turned out negative. I believe he would have been on pharmaceuticals for psychiatric treatment, and those should have shown up. I don't know if they took a hair sample or if they just took blood samples. But on to what Farron did, he said he confirmed that Gietzen had taken fingerprints, but he did not recall receiving any copies personally. He noted that copies of the investigation were filed in Washington and these were being forwarded to the district attorney's office. Farron emphasized jurisdictional nuances. The base police held primary authority over military personnel on the base, while Ward County Sheriff's Department handled non-military residents on base and off base personnel. Carr, as a civilian on base, was in a gray zone. So I don't know if I want to go as far. I mean, obviously the case was mishandled totally. Has the Carr family allegedly been involved in satanic activity and criminal activity? Yes, it has been alleged. But as for my own opinion, I think the family looks suspicious, and I'll just leave it there. Is that fair enough?
That's fair enough. And John, what are your opinions? And again, guys, these are just opinions. We're not claiming anything as fact. This is just opinions based off of our own research and critical thinking skills. So John, hit us, buddy. What's your opinion of the Carr family?
Yeah, I feel like not just because of the sort of personal oddness that comes across in the family interview with the Queens DA investigators, but also the proximity of their home to all this other ongoing cult activity in Yonkers. The last time we all spoke here like this, we spoke primarily about Paul Ranieri, Brother John Paul. He was friends with John Carr. They went to school. In fact, Ranieri says that it was John who sort of lured him into the cult. And the Carr home it's just about a mile from Untermeyer Park, where the cult allegedly met and conducted rituals for many years. The old Croton Aqueduct path runs right behind the house. This is where the remains of German shepherds were found for many years along the aqueduct path. The neighborhood, it was so. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this so that people will understand. Just to encapsulate it in a few words. That neighborhood in Yonkers, this neighborhood where the Carrs lived, roughly a mile from Untermeyer Park, there was so much strange and suspicious activity in this neighborhood over the years that for the family and for surrounding families not to have been aware that all this stuff was going on, it would have been almost impossible. This is where the cult operated. This was sort of the heart of it in this neighborhood. So I think, these are things that are happening literally in their backyard. So I think they knew about it, and my personal belief and opinion is that yes, there is a lot of reason to be concerned about the family's proximity to all this activity and their own role in it. I believe they did play a role in it.
And you're right. We think we talked about this in the last episode too. I want to remind people, we talked about the neighborhood. This is common for Luciferian families. They do, you think about covens, they do hive together in neighborhoods. Especially the wealthier the families, they might even have tunnels underneath their houses to each other's houses. And that is absolutely, and it's so funny because we live in a very nice area of Atlanta, and there's a neighborhood right next to us that's one of the older Atlanta neighborhoods. And of course, the houses in there probably you're not going to find a house less than 10 million, but they're older houses. And we'll walk through the neighborhood, and part of the neighborhood feels good, but then there's part of the neighborhood that's super creepy. And even my boyfriend, who's been studying this group, in our world for almost 20 over 20 years actually, he'll point out and say this area definitely with symbolism, there's symbolism that makes it look very suspicious. And they know who each other, it's a secret society. And I know that sounds crazy to people who are new to like conspiracies, maybe not my channel, but they keep their religion there, and they truly believe, that Lucifer is the light bearer and the bringer, and they truly have a belief in what they're doing, even though it's violent. And they know they can't talk about it openly because their religious beliefs are felonies. They're, even though part of their religious brethren are in our government and police force, but the kids are trained to keep it, and it almost sounds to me, and of course I don't know, I'm not a psychiatrist, but a lot of these kids that go through, it's very common for boys and girls to be sodomized at a very young age. We spoke about that last episode because of where the kundalini lies, the base of the spine, and they feel like they can pull that and harness that from the kid. And depending on how young the child is when the abuse starts, that can cause like almost like a break in the mind and the psyche, and can end up causing incredible mental illness and disorders as an adult, including DID, or dissociated identity. They used to call it like multiple personality disorder. It can end up causing that. And of course, again, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not an expert. This is just stuff I've learned through research. And it does, we know that Raniere in the last episode, that he had a lot of mental problems that very much seemed like PTSD. He was obviously older as an older teenager when the abuse started. But if you're looking at allegedly the Carrs being born into a family that practices this religion, that type of abuse is starting from infancy. And so it's a different scope of mental breakdown when that abuse starts below the age of 5. And so even though it's a hard one, like when I think about John and Michael Carr, like they I think they were very violent. I wouldn't want to be around them. Like they kind of scare me as people, but there is a part of me that kind of has empathy for them.
I would agree with you there.
I'm sad for them.
Children that they were. I've said this often about Suzanne Conway, who I've researched extensively. These children had no chance. I mean, they're from a very early age, they were placed in this box, and I think there's very little chance that they could ever have gotten out of it.
Agreed. And that's makes this case, I think that's what's so fascinating about this case as a whole. It's so nuanced. And
I'll be blunt. Whenever I wrote these blogs on John Carr over the period of a couple weeks, I felt so dark. I felt like I could barely pull myself out of a hole, and I exited feeling. I felt extreme empathy for him. I feel sorry for everything he had to go through, his substance abuse disorder, and anything else that he went through. I mean, does that excuse his behavior? No, it does not. All the same, yeah, I
complicated.
I feel very, everything is complicated in life. Nothing's black and white. And
Jonathan's right. That's my, these kids born into these, because guys, I want to really emphasize, this is a religion. Just like people are Catholic or Protestant or Mormon or whatever, this is a religion, and it's a religion based upon ritualistic abuse. It's called SRA. It's a literal thing. And Jonathan's right. Kids born into this system, this family system, they don't stand a chance. And they're seeing the head of the police force come into their house for services. They're seeing, and that my heart just breaks for them. And I guess, and this is just my opinion, when we look at the emotional makeup of these people, I think just John's behavior and sporadic mental issues probably indicates that there was probably a conscience in there, a deeper under a pain. And I think if you're a sociopath or a psychopath, you don't feel that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why some of these kids that grow up in these Luciferian families, they come out of it unscathed almost because they don't have any feeling, And I know even for some of my whistleblower friends, like at a certain age in early childhood, they're forced to kill kittens. They're forced to try to get the empathy out of them, and it's so disgusting what this religion does. But when mom and dad are telling you, and you come from a long generation of this type I've done a lot of deep dives into Mary Queen of Scots and her relationship with Catherine de Medici, who was absolutely a Luciferian. Looking at all the evidence we have, of course, this goes back to like the 1500s, so a long time ago. But even though she didn't have a lot of access to her son, King James, who wrote the King James Bible, you look at his private life, dude was just like John Carr. Like you see these behaviors that are just repeated human behaviors based on this type of trauma. And so if you're watching this and you're mad at your parents, but you didn't grow up in a Luciferian house, at least you can be grateful that your parents didn't enforce this type of pain on you.
Well, to be frank, it's not just Luciferian. It transfers over to gang initiations.
Yes,
it
absolutely.
transfers over to cult initiations, human trafficking, how human traffickers recruit their victims, and also child soldiering overseas. There's so much overlap with how controlling victims works. People need to broaden their perspective and look at it and say, it's not just satanic. It's a pattern across attempting to control individuals for their own gain.
Absolutely, it's a service to self. It's a selfishness. The law. We're students of the law of one, which really just template everything. And you in third density where we are now, we have a choice to make. We can either go service to others, be in the light, or service to self, be in the dark. And everything that's personal gain and that selfish taking from others to serve the self is all darkness. So yeah, it doesn't matter what the umbrella it's under. It's the same disgusting behavior. And that's why another reason why I get a lot of comments when we do these cases. I got it especially with the Gypsy Rose case, like, why are we still talking about this? We're still talking about it because it matters, because this is humanity. And when we forget about the humanity of John Carr or Michael Carr or David Berkowitz, then we've lost touch with our own soul. And to understand how these practices work helps us spot them better. And it's I can't think about it for too long. When I think about all the countless children that are in this situation, it like really messes with my head,
It's a blackening experience, and sometimes it takes days to get that feeling off of you whenever you're intuitive and you're empathetic. I agree with you, Bryce.
Even with like Epstein, it's I think we're further enough into the video now to talk about it, learning that there was a temple on Epstein's island, and what were they doing in that temple with those kids, and seeing how the temple matched Ellen DeGeneres's backdrop. It just makes you sad. When I first learned that, I had that blackening, Chris, where I was depressed for I couldn't go see my nieces and nephews, because if I looked at them, I would start crying, because the thought of that happening to them was just too much for me to bear, because it was just it's so disgusting. And so even though John Carr, I believe, in my opinion, that he was part of Son of Sam, the whole fiasco of 1976. So he obviously hurt people. But I know he himself was also a hurting. I think these people don't ever leave. I don't think their mind ever evolves past that of being a scared child.
Well, something that I did not add earlier, and this is related to the Lee Slater interview. Apparently, John Carr did tell Lee Slater that he knew David Berkowitz, and that they would ride together downtown if they bumped into each other. And they bumped into each other more than once. And I mean, in the New York area, how many times does that logically actually happen, where you're
Right, good
bumping
point.
into a person repeatedly? I mean, how large is the population?
Right. Oh, there's no doubt in my mind. Like, I know we have to say allegedly, but there's no doubt in my mind that they knew each other very well. No doubt in my mind.
These guys knew each other. Yeah. And you know, and oh, by the way, I just wanted to interject briefly here. It took me this long to find the Queen's DA memo regarding John's ex-wife, but I just emailed that to you guys. So
Okay.
It's hard to read. It's the print is bad, but there's several of the things that we've just discussed are mentioned in the memo. It's several pages long. So, but yeah, they're, you know, the entire narrative of the opposing team really depends on isolating Berkowitz and saying that no one else was involved in this at any stage of the game in any way. And you look at the evidence, the abundant evidence, and anybody objective can see that that's just not so. There were other people involved in this, and John Santucci, the Queen's District Attorney who reopened the case in 1979, he felt that way. He was adamant about that. He said the evidence is that Berkowitz did not act alone. He had friends, he had accomplices who were also involved in this. So what we continue to get from the opposing team is just this desperate insistence that no one else was involved. When they periodically come up with these what they try to portray as scoops, like, wow, fascinating new information, Berkowitz this, Berkowitz that, but it's always just David, because their entire narrative, it has to rely on the contention that no one else was involved. So despite all their claims about all this research they've done and all this new information that they found, it always just involves Berkowitz, when in fact, objectively, anybody who investigates this case is going to find that lots of other people were involved. And if the conclusion that somebody's reaching is always that it was just Berkowitz, then they are not objectively investigating the evidence.
No, and I do have to say too, I just want to make this clear to the opposing team too. You know, it's kind of comical in a sense, because in the past like 6-7 years, it's become abundantly clear to most people in this world that usually the narrative that is fed to us is not the full story or the story at all. And I would encourage people, I can't remember what date, I want to say 1972, sometime in the 70s, there was a Senate hearing where it was released. There was something called Project Mockingbird that was absolute. This is not a conspiracy theory. It was released in a Senate hearing where there are certain narratives that are constructed and sent out to, you know, huge publications to print a particular story to sway a population. And
you
so
are correct. That's what disinformation is.
Yeah,
yes.
It's part of the propaganda machine, and it comes from it's an offshoot of Operation Paperclip, which that's a whole other topic in itself. But even that alone makes you, if a normal, intelligent person would see that and realize that it has been absolutely legal for us to be lied to. At that point, you would think, you go, wait a minute, that means that I should probably be doing my own research. I should probably be double checking things and not necessarily going with the mainstream narrative on anything. And the fact that this is just so obvious, like you're right, Jonathan, like any normal person can look at this and be like, there's a cult here. Like, this is not one person. And I do think all the people that have emailed me and shared their, you know, from their family's involvement as far as law enforcement not wishing to come forward for safety purposes, saying that absolutely most people were aware in law enforcement that they weren't looking for one person, that this was a bigger operation. So the question is, why would they put a fake narrative out? Well, that's where it goes into like, well, who are they protecting? Who is
Well, a lot of it is disinformation. What they put out initially is not information that's necessarily accurate, and people can't get their hands on the correct information. And then the narrative congeals. And whenever people try to point out things in the narrative that are not factual, they meet more resistance. And arguably, although I believe David Berkowitz has changed, and I consider him to be a friend at this point, I don't think he has helped matters by changing his stories and not being consistent. I mean, at first he says he acted alone, and he said some things whenever he was first arrested that are not exactly factual. Things entered the paper that were factual, and then he was working with Abrahamson on his book at the same time he was working with Maury Terry, and that might have been a protective measure. There could be all sorts of reasons for that type of behavior. All the same, he didn't keep his responses consistent, and it has made him not as credible as he should be. And that is added to some of the disinformation, and that's probably part of the narrative.
Yeah, I think my opinion, I think that we've talked about this, Chris. I think Berkowitz is still scared. I think and I don't blame him. I'm scared of these people too. These people are violent and they're unhinged and they have friends in high places. So I don't blame him. I totally understand. I don't think he's a reliable narrator, but I think that's literally a lot to do with his own fears, and I can absolutely empathize with that. And
I believe he's as honest as he's capable of being, considering he's in maximum security and he has had a previous attack on his life, and he was behind bars. And I think people need to create a space for some empathy and understanding.
And self-preservation, absolutely.
I mean, I can say I probably, I don't even know if I would have handled myself as well as he has if I were in the same situation.
It's a lot. And I think that's what's missing again. Is as we were talking about, it just seems, from my interaction with the other side, it just seems very, very cold, very just, there's this saying that black and white thinking is often a sign of a mental disorder. Most people do have the ability to see nuance and to understand that things are shades of gray. And I see that coming from our side more, is where people are willing to say, just because David Berkowitz was a perpetrator, he's also a victim. Just because John Carr was a perpetrator, he's also a victim. Like, this is a messy case, and human beings are messy. And so I feel like the other side just sees things very black and white, and that's not humanity.
My personal opinion, whenever you start seeing things in black and white like that, I look at it similar to intrapsychic splitting with borderline personality disorder.
100%. Yes.
You're either on one side or the other, and you're swinging, and life is more like a Likert scale, and there are subtle nuances in between, and people need to start evaluating the little things in between.
Absolutely. I was thinking borderline as well, Chris, that's a sign of borderline personality disorder, which can be a cause from trauma as well. But I see that a lot. I think from all of you guys that I've gotten to know, you seem you're aware of the situation that everyone's in, but there's a side of you that's very, I see that with you, Jonathan, you, Chris, there's a human side of you, and you understand the humanity. Even though John Carr did terrible things in his very short life, he was very young, there was still humanity there. He was still a human being. And a lot of his personality was reflected upon that humanity, because he, in my opinion, he had been tortured from the time he was a child. And that's
there is a family history of domestic abuse, whether you want to argue it's satanic or not. I mean, it's well documented. And you can't go through that type of abuse as a child without having some type of damage. Everybody handles it differently. Some people lean towards substance abuse. Some people pick up a bag of Doritos and eat the whole thing in one setting. Everybody handles things differently. And yeah, that needs to be taken into consideration. I know John was wanting to discuss John and debate John's nickname, whether it was Wheaties.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, do we want to bring about, like, I know that's in the letter, but also I'll let you take over, Jonathan, how you want to go into that with, and that's kind of what I was segueing into when I asked you guys about the Carr family too. So, take it away, Jonathan.
Sure. Well, this is something that I won't go into a lot of detail with, but the contention recently has been that Wheaties was never a nickname used by John Carr, and specifically that quote unquote Maury lied. That Maury Terry made up the story that Wheaties was a nickname of John Carr. Well, the police concluded in their own investigation that had been a nickname used by John Carr and that it was known by a few of his friends and associates.
Okay, do we have police paperwork though stating that was his actual nickname yet? Has that been released, or is that just in the newspaper?
No, there is not police paperwork that has been publicly released, but this is where the details become very important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So next it's in the police. It's we don't have the police reports, but it's said in the newspaper that it's per a police source, per Mediger and Maury Terry, correct? Because you forwarded me the article.
Yes.
Arguably, hopefully they would not have let him publish that without actually knowing the source. Now, at the time, if it was contested, you would think that the family would have reached out to the newspaper to say that was not his nickname and would demand a retraction, but that never happened.
Well, not only that, but I'll go into some detail about this.
Okay.
The story was published under the headline was "Carr was fearful for his life." This was published in the Westchester newspapers on October 16th, 1979. This was when the Queen's DA's office had reopened the case. The byline was Maury Terry and James Mediger. Mediger co-wrote a lot of these early stories about cult involvement with Maury before he was sort of edged out of the picture, but he and Maury co-authored a lot of the early articles on this story. Specifically, the article says, and I'm going to quote it exactly here, one of Carr's nicknames, known only to a few associates, was Wheaties, police say. Now, again, this article was co-authored by Maury Terry and James Mediger. The contention is that Maury made this up, as if this was some opinion piece that Maury was writing for the newspaper. It wasn't. It was a news article. As you say, the Carr family never asked for a retraction. Not only that, but the police never said that Maury and James Mediger had misrepresented their investigatory conclusions.
You're correct.
This article was the contention that Wheaties was a nickname used by John Carr was never in doubt. It was never officially questioned. The police did not say that Maury had misrepresented their views. Years later, John Santucci, who was heading this investigation, wrote a blurb for the back cover of Maury's book, The Ultimate Evil. My question is, where is the evidence that Maury made this up? This was a news article. This was not an opinion piece. I'm just going to state unequivocally here that if the opposing team's narrative did not happen to match the official narrative, when they make these ridiculous allegations, they would be laughed out of town.
Well, you would think that Santucci, would not want to put his name on a book if it wasn't fairly accurate. You know, I mean, obviously Maury Terry's book is not perfect. Nobody's 100% perfect. But all the same, whenever you're working with a district attorney like Santucci, and there are certain allegations being made, such as the nickname, you would think if that was inaccurate at the time, Santucci would have said, no, this is not accurate, or at a minimum, that the family would have reached out to the paper and said, this is not his nickname and we want a retraction, or battle it from there. But it doesn't appear that was done.
Right.
And this takes us back to the DA interview with Carr, where she says that whenever John Carr was eating Wheaties, because apparently he liked the cereal, that she joked that he was cannibalizing. She joked that he was cannibalizing himself.
Chris, for my audience, who is Wheat Carr in relationship to John Carr?
She is John and Michael Carr's sister. She is the daughter of Francis and Sam Carr.
And she plays a pretty prominent role in Maury Terry's book, The Ultimate Evil, I will say too, for those who haven't read it.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to go into her further in this podcast because I don't feel it's necessary, but I do think it's necessary to bring up her DA tape with her saying that she joked with John that he was cannibalizing himself whenever he ate it. And that seems to imply that could have been his nickname. There's some nuance there, obviously. In addition, she had stated that, and John might want to cover this more, that John Carr was listed in the phone book under John Wheat Carr. You want to go into that more, John?
Well, I mean, I don't. It was a phone listing for the kids. It was a separate line for kids, which is the older brother and the sister, which is why the names were listed back to back like that. That was a very common practice in the 70s. I believe now that the other team is reaching for further justification of their own publicly stated viewpoints. This ultimately, if you make the claim, the burden of proof lies with you. They have a claim, they can't prove it. That's a problem.
Well, I would agree with you there. And I mean, she also conceded in the interview that maybe some sick person called him to. She couldn't know. She couldn't clearly state whether this was the case or not. Now, arguably, another person had said, "Well, David Berkowitz could have just looked it up in the phone book because it's under John Wheat Carr, and that's how he knew it." Well, that's different than saying Wheaties. That's far different. I believe that Charles Ott also, per Paul Hart, had confirmed that was John Carr's nickname, and people have said that Ott is not reliable because he was Maury Terry's friend. But you're talking about multiple arguments piling up on top of each other that this was his nickname. Am I going to definitively say it was his nickname? I'm not going to do it. Am I going to lean toward that it's a possibility that it was his nickname? Yes. And for it to have landed in the Breslin letter and all of these other strange circumstances, such as his suicide versus homicide, I think the whole case looks sus.
Question for you guys: was Wheat a family name? If that's the sister's name and his middle name, do we know if that was a big family name?
I have no idea.
I'm not sure about the origin of the name. I've wondered about that. I'm not really. I'm not sure where the name came from. What I will say is that, again, it was accurately reported in the newspaper that the police came to the conclusion that this was one of John Carr's nicknames. The other team claims that this is not true, yet they have no proof.
Actually,
reported. No one ever contradicted Maury on that count. John Santucci, who headed the investigation, never contradicted Maury on that point.
Actually, I'm starting to recall something, and I don't quote me on the accuracy on this. I remember reading this in a group that maybe that name Wheat, that there was somebody else at that property that owned it prior that also had the name.
Well,
don't quote me on that.
So the reason why I asked that is because my name Bryce is my mother's maiden name. It's a family name. And so if Wheat is a family name, then it's very likely that they would nickname. I mean, my mom still gets called one of the Bryce girls. I have some cousins, second cousins who their name is Bryce, and then I have another female cousin whose middle name is Bryce because it was our mother's maiden name. And so it seems like it probably, if I had to guess, it probably is a family name.
Well, I know that there is a history with the family of grabbing family names, like Michael Vale Carr. I know that Vale, Bail, was previously in the family, according to a death certificate that I've looked at.
So he could be, that was very well could have been his nickname because it's a family name. In my opinion, I'm guessing it is, because why else would that name be so prominent with two kids? And just from my own experience with my name, and how confusing it gets sometimes, because I'll say, my Bryce grandparents, and I have to clarify Bryce is my mother's maiden name. I'm not claiming them just as my own. That's their surname. So yeah, I as someone who carries a surname, a family name, I would definitely say that's a huge possibility that Wheaties was, and if the police report said it, that was his. Even though his sister was also that name, it's a family name, and it could be a very, very much a nickname for him.
Yeah, I would lean toward that as well. I mean, if the newspaper is saying that in the police report, if they're saying a police source, and nobody made a rebuttal and said that was not his nickname, and it needed it and didn't demand a retraction. And there's the implication in the DA tape that maybe some sicko could have nicknamed him that, and arguably he wasn't associating with the best of people, that it could have in all likelihood been his nickname. Am I going to say with 100% certainty that was his nickname? No, I'm not going to do that, just because I don't have the police documents and I don't have the names. But I'm not going to be binary and say no, that wasn't his nickname, because that's not logical to do that.
Well, I'll say a couple of things here. The first thing is, we don't have access to all the interviews. We don't have access to Linda O'Connor's interview, because Linda told investigators that his nickname was Wheaties. She said he liked to eat Wheaties. She said specifically that she thought the nickname originated with his Minot circle of friends rather than in Yonkers. That she didn't know that, but she had just always assumed that. She's quoted in that regard in Maury's book. But we don't have access to that tape, nor do we have access to at least half of Tom Taylor's interview. So just clarification really quick. She said that in a DA interview that's probably transcripted, but we don't have the transcript that says that was John's nickname, correct? Is that what you're saying? I'm not. I was trying to finish the statement there, because I didn't hear the first part of what you said. Go ahead.
Okay, so you're saying that Linda O'Connor said that his nickname was Wheaties, but it's in Maury Terry's book. We don't have the transcript. Is that accurate?
No, but this is very important. I need to say this all in one piece.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Linda quoted fairly extensively in Maury Terry's book. She says that she knew that this was a nickname of John's, that she it originated with John's Minot circle of friends rather than in Yonkers. She didn't know, but she assumed that.
Okay, and you would think if Linda O'Connor did not say that, and Maury Terry was making that up, that Linda O'Connor would have contacted Maury Terry and said, I did not say this, and dispute what was said in his book, and she never did that.
Well, yes, but I'm also saying that the public evidence that we don't have Linda O'Connor's tape. So when the other teams, it's not among any of this stuff, nobody the tapes, that this was his nickname. We're missing significant portions of the tapes, not just Linda O'Connor's interview, but at least half of Tom Taylor's as well. So they cannot point to that as a definitive source and say, well, it's not on the tapes. We don't have all the tapes. Their justification for this is just extraordinarily weak, and they're being intellectually dishonest about this, and they know it.
I would agree with you, John. That's why I'm just pointing out that the trail, that if something was wrong, that corrections should have been asked for, but they weren't. Do I prefer to look at the actual DA transcript and a full interview of the DA and her going back and forth, yes. But from an argument perspective, I think it's logical to assume that it was most likely his nickname based on people not reaching out for corrections, including Linda O'Connor. And to say it absolutely was not his nickname isn't logical.
Right. Well, what this boils down to, but particularly in this instance, the issue for them is not even so much whether or not this was a nickname that John Carr ever used. The issue for them is their insistence that Maury Terry was lying. That's what this boils down to. Because every time somebody discusses evidence found and written about by Maury Terry, they have to say it's a lie. So that is the real issue for them, and that's why they keep coming back with this.
Well, sometimes I think it's rough to say that he was lying. I mean, was he absolutely perfect? No, but sometimes mistakes are made, and that doesn't mean a person was lying. That's another binary. You're saying, okay, the person's either lying or they're truthful. It doesn't exist like that. Sometimes people make mistakes, and that's in between, and that's not a lie,
They're saying what they contend specifically is this is a lie because Maury Terry said it.
Yeah,
this is right down the line for years on end. Their whole argument hinges on this. Maury had to have lied because he just couldn't be telling the truth. This is the problem. And this is anybody who listens to them and takes any stock in anything that they claim needs to understand this. There is no objectivity involved in this. They are inherently intellectually dishonest when they do this. People need to.
They also attacked his personal character as well for years. I mean, if I remember, whenever I read the book, and it's been a long time since I read the book. I read it twice, and I read it about 3.5 years ago, but I believe that they tried to pass around that Chinati and Maury Terry were gay in order to ruin their reputations. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, they did. And it's exactly the same kind of tactics that are being used now.
Yeah, and I had another person I was in contact for a while, and I won't say who it was. It just kind of made me roll my eyes that made the comment, that Maury Terry was visiting leather bars. Well, he was visiting leather bars because he was investigating, and that's where the investigative trail took him. That doesn't mean that he was gay. I mean, why would you even bring that in the conversation?
That's what I was going to say, Chris. Sense. I remember reading that in the book, but it's like if people are still using that now, then I think it's fair to say you're a bigot. Like, what does it matter what someone's sexuality is?
Well, this person who said this also believes that more than one person was involved in the crimes, and why the person would try to say this about Maury Terry is beyond me. But I have my own opinions on this person, and I'll just.
In 2026, it's not a crime to be. No one cares, right? Like, we don't care if you're gay or straight. It doesn't matter.
Well, he wasn't gay. He
wasn't.
He wasn't homosexual. He had a girlfriend. He got married. But even if he was, I mean, what's the point? But that's where the investigative trail was taking him. Were to bars like these, and it has nothing to do with his sexuality. Yeah. So maybe people need to knock those arguments off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anytime people have to resort to disparaging someone personally, character assassinations, personal smears, they have no argument. That's all they've got.
Exactly. And that's my biggest problem with the other side. I honestly don't care what someone's opinion is about the case. You have a right to your opinion. But when you start to dox people and call them names and make up lies, that's because you can't debate. That's when it becomes a huge issue, because why are, for the other side, why are you so invested in you being right that you have to try to absolutely destroy the person who just has simply has a different opinion from you? There's a huge problem here. And that's why I personally believe, in my personal opinion, that a lot of the other side is controlled opposition. Because otherwise, why would they even care, that someone has a different opinion about them? It's crazy. It's wild. So,
it's like Margaret Thatcher said, and I'm actually going to read the quote this time. I always cheer up immensely if an attack is particularly wounding, because I think, if if they attack one personally, it means they have not a single political argument left.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about the personal attacks. They're just, I guess they should just cheer people up at this point.
I mean, you don't get called a zombie Paris Hilton every day, so I'm still gonna make that T-shirt.
Yeah.
So,
like, just stick to your research. Do anything else, but just quit cheering people up by making personal attacks.
Yeah,
I'll leave it there.
It's the thing. We could compile a list here, just on the air as we're recording this, of how many times they have resorted to personal insults.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to fall back on that because they don't do research. They don't have coherent, consistent arguments, so that they always attack us as a matter of first resort. It's like I said, if their position did not happen to align with the official narrative about Son of Sam, they would be laughed out of the room. To say that they're intellectual lightweights is an understatement. They're not even that. They have the platform that they do because they happen to agree with the official narrative. But under any other set of circumstances, their argument would be considered pathetic and laughable.
It would be baseless. One of my favorite quotes, I think it's from Mark, I can't remember his last name. The truth is belligerent. Like, the truth is belligerent. The truth isn't always gonna, make you feel good. And if for them, if they get so upset by us saying the truth, well, the truth is belligerent. And I'm going to go so far as to say sometimes I've wondered if some of these players on the other side aren't a part of the same cult, and that's why they're so hell-bent on trying to shut us up. And I laugh because I have a pretty big platform, and every person on my platform is a very open-minded person who's always, probably 9 times out of 10, going to probably side with us. We might have slightly differing views in certain little things, but the overall consensus that this is cult. And so, it's overwhelming the amount of people who do not believe the official narrative. And so my only consensus is, who are you trying to defend when you are so blatantly trying to destroy anybody who just does some research into this? The stuff that I know has happened behind the scenes. It's like, this is very obvious that something else is going on here, and it's not okay, and it's probably illegal. And anyway, I won't go any further than that. But
I will say this: do I think that they were a cult? Yes, but I think that terminology confuses a lot of people, and it's very polarizing. In criminological terms, the field prefers to use groups now, and groups are under the umbrella are cults and gangs and whatnot, because they all have similar mind control mechanisms. And I prefer to just call them a group.
Yeah.
But I also think that they function like a gang, because they had taken over a park, and parks are known for taking over. Gangs are known for taking over parks, and if don't discount that there weren't satanic gangs in the 60s and 70s, because historical evidence suggests otherwise.
I mean, there's still satanic cults nowadays, so
Yeah.
But you guys, we've been almost at 2 hours now. I don't want to keep watching the weather. I think I'm still good for the rest of the day, but I know that we're all in the line of the eye of the storm. But is there anything you guys want to end with today?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I think we've covered just about everything that's important.
Jonathan, is there anything else you want to add to this?
Yeah, no, I think we've hit all the points that we intended to from the beginning. I will say, in relation to what you guys are just talking about, I think these people have a vested interest in maintaining the official narrative, and any time that conflicting evidence is brought up, they get very nervous, but to have quite literally a vested interest. I believe people are compensated for publicly maintaining the official narrative. I really do believe that.
I agree with you, Jonathan. And I've been on YouTube now for 6 years, and just the politics of YouTube and people who are perhaps controlled opposition, they don't deal with the type of censorship that those of us who aren't controlled opposition do deal with. So there's a lot going on here that I absolutely, I think there is, like you said, a vested interest in maintaining this narrative. And so with that said, I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
I want to say one thing. If certain people have problems with being labeled as controlled opposition, then they need to stop acting like it.
If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a fucking duck. That's just.
I'm not going to say this person is controlled opposition, but if they don't want people to call them controlled opposition, quit acting like it.
Right.
Yes, that's absolutely right. They could level with us and they could say, no, look, here's the reason I believe this, or here's why I feel this way, rather than constantly being on the attack and with this nonstop stream of personal attacks and insults. So yeah, they only encourage the view that they have a basic conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's not the fact that these people disagree with us that's the problem. I don't care if you disagree. The problem is you're acting like controlled opposition. If you just simply disagreed with us, there would be no need to personally attack people, to dox people, to threaten people. It would just be agree to disagree.
There are people that I'm in contact with every day that I research with that we don't have the same opinions, and we can argue it out and not resort to turning into 3-year-olds. But nobody's going to be on the same page 100% of the time. But whenever you start to disagree and you start to make personal attacks toward people, you're entering a whole different realm. And maybe you need to be a little bit more professional. If you want to be considered credible.
There's that Cardi B thing. That's weird. That's suspicious. That's how I whenever it's like, that's weird. That's suspicious. Democrats are married to Republicans. Atheists are married to spiritual people, and they make it work. It's not the fact that they disagree with us that makes me think they're controlled opposition. It's their behavior around it.
That is correct.
That is the red flag to me.
If they are right, if they are correct, and the case has been solved, and it was just Berkowitz, and he acted alone, and no one else had anything to do with it, and then they've solved the case, right? It's all over. We can all go home. They're right. Why do they keep coming back and arguing about it?
Exactly. The truth is belligerent. It doesn't need a defense. So why are they getting defensive? That's a really good point, Jonathan. Yeah. If your side has the narrative, the official narrative, then you wouldn't even need to argue, right? So who are you protecting? That's my question.
Yes.
So anyway, you guys, well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. There's so many parts to this case I want to unpack. I want to unpack the guy in the neighborhood who committed suicide. Was he the postman? That's fascinating to me. What happened there? There's so many elements of this story. So I hope you guys will come back very soon. And I can't wait I'm hopefully going to get this up on Monday. Hopefully you're watching this on Monday. If we lose power, it will load when I can load it. So again, I hope that everybody in the United States right now is safe and warm. I just got notification while we were filming that Georgia Power, our power company here in Georgia, is suspending anybody who had not paid their bill and was at risk to have their electricity turned off. They are suspending it so everybody has electricity over this storm. So that's kind of them. So
good. That's a human rights issue. People shouldn't have their power turned off and freeze to death.
Exactly. So I just got notified by Georgia Power. So it looks like they're still preparing, because I keep getting notifications about an emergency, even though it's only like 50 right now outside. But anyway, well, I hope everybody stays safe. And I thank you so much, Jonathan and Criminal Justice Chris. I'm going to have all their links, you guys, everything. I have the link that Jonathan sent me, the Unsolved Mysteries link, Chris's blogs, a link to Jonathan's book, and his Substack will also be down below, you guys, so you can continue to follow. Jonathan and Chris are both incredible researchers. And so I really highly, I know I have a lot of intellectual people here who are really incredible critical thinkers and complex thinkers. So I know you guys will thoroughly enjoy their work and getting to view their research. And it just helps us be aware of the world around us today, because these same shenanigans are going on today, as we know. And so, as the late Ram Dass said, we're all just walking each other home. we have to protect each other. And so,
Yes.
anything final from you guys that you want to say before we head out to brace the storm?
No, thank you for having us on.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. And Jonathan, you're close to me, so us Southerners, man.
We'll get through this. We'll get through the next few days. Hopefully, it won't be as bad as what they're forecasting. Sometimes they kind of go into overkill mode, just to have some news to cover for a few days. So hopefully, it's going to blow over entirely, or at least it won't be as bad as what we're anticipating.
It must be a slow news week when they're hyping this stuff up. But we always laugh, like all the church ladies, they think Jesus is coming back in the South when it snows. So I'll end on a funny thing. I was watching a stand-up comedian once from Miami. His parents were from Cuba. He grew up in Miami, and he joined the military, and he got stationed in Colorado, and he had never seen snow before. And in his stand-up, he was talking about the first time it snowed, and he got out of his car and looked up, and he was like, "Why is cocaine falling from the sky?" I just still laugh at that to this day. Why is cocaine falling from the sky? So you guys, I hope if you're in a place that gets snow and it's safe, and power lines aren't down, that you have fun with your kids, go outside, sled, have some fun, and enjoy your life, enjoy your time with your family, and please be safe, everyone. And I thank you guys again, and we will talk to you all very, very soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.